Chapter 2807. Come on, let's have a jar each. Fatty carried the wine jars and placed them in front of everyone. Dad, where's mine? Situ Feiyang asked. Uncle, me too. Lu Xiaofei raised his hand. Lu Xiaojia was also eager to join in. Why are all of you kids drinking? Go down and get some juice for yourselves. Fatso said. Dad, you're discriminating against us. Situ Feiyang was immediately displeased. That's right. Xiaojia is only in her teens. She's not an adult yet. But my brother and I are already adults. Why can't we drink? Lu Xiaofei was indignant. Adults? Take off your pants then. Let me see if your hair is fully grown. Fatso glanced at the two of them. Cough cough. Pei Yi, who was drinking water, choked on it. He looked up at Fatso speechlessly and said, There are female compatriots here. Can you not be so straightforward? Apart from Xiaojia, are the rest of them considered female compatriots? Fatso glanced at Wang Yu, Li Yan and the Spirit Queen. Fatso, what do you mean by that? Aren't we women? His words immediately aroused the anger of the few women. You're all tigresses. How are you women? Fatso shook his head. Wang Yu's face turned sullen, and she looked at Li Yan. You're really asking for a beating. Don't worry, let him be smug first. I'll teach him a lesson when we get home. Li Yan said with a smile. Fatso's body stiffened. Wang Yu and the other women immediately gloated. Qin Feiyang and the others also had a mocking look on their faces. Li He chuckled and looked at Fatso. Since Xiaofei and the rest want to drink, give them a jar. Grandpa. Li Yan immediately looked at Li He in displeasure. I'm happy. Just let them be. Besides, they won't each have a jar. The three of them will share a jar. It's not a big deal. Li He said with a smile. You're spoiling them. Li Yan was displeased. Actually, it doesn't matter. Thinking back to when you guys were little Fei's age, didn't you all start drinking? Yishu said. Li Yan glanced at Yishu, then at Li He, then at Lu Xiaofei, his sister, and Situ Feiyang. I agree, but don't go too far. Thanks, Mom. Thank you, Aunt. The three of them laughed joyfully. Lu Xiaofei immediately ran over with a jar and said, Brother, come and ask if it smells good. Situ Feiyang leaned forward, his face instantly filled with intoxication, and said, This wine should only exist in the heavens. Looking at the two brats, Li Yan shook her head and smiled helplessly. Fatso returned to his seat, looked at Lu Xiaofei and the other two, and said, The three of you don't get drunk over there. Go and pour wine for everyone. Little Jia, you go. Lu Xiaofei and Situ Feiyang were already drinking. This smell was simply too delicious. Lu Xiaojia shook her head helplessly. She stood up and poured wine for everyone. She appeared natural and unrestrained, sensible, and obedient. It's good to have a daughter. Li Yan looked at Lu Xiaojia, her face full of affection. Then you and Fatso can have another child. White-Eyed Wolf said. One child is already so troublesome. How can I be in the mood to have another child? Li Yan shook her head. What's so troublesome? If you can't take care of him, Grandpa will help you. Li He looked at Li Yan and said. Obviously, he had this thought long ago. You? Li Yan glanced at Li He, shook her head and said, Forget it. I don't know what will happen if you bring him up. Why do I feel that you're disdainful of him? Li He was displeased. I'm not disdainful. I'm just being close to him. You old people spoil the children too much. Especially you. You're 2 generations away. If you bring him up, won't you spoil him to the heavens? Li Yan shook her head. Li He smiled bitterly. If this was not disdain, what was it? After Lu Xiaojia returned to her seat, Fatso held a wine glass, stood up, and said with a smile, First of all, let's toast to welcome Boss and Brother Wolf back. At that moment, everyone held up their wine glasses, stood up, smiled at Qin Feiyang, and drank the wine in their glasses. Thank you. Qin Feiyang stood up with a smile, held his wine glass, and drank it in one gulp. Why don't you be so polite? White-Eyed Wolf directly held a wine jar, drinking as he said. This is not polite. It's a welcoming ceremony. After Fatso finished speaking, he poured another glass, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Boss, I want to toast you alone. Thank you. Why are you thanking me? Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. If it weren't for you, I, Fatso, wouldn't have achieved what I have today. It's even possible that I would have died in Black Bear City a long time ago, and there wouldn't even be anyone to collect my body. It's also you who fearlessly took me to Yunzhou to avenge my family. There were countless nights that I had been thinking, if I hadn't met you in this life, what would have happened to me? Without a doubt. Even if I had a blood feud, I could only endure it silently. Even if I worked hard, I would only be like a dead dog, struggling at death's door for the rest of my life. Not to mention, marrying such a beautiful wife, and now the status and power that others can't pursue in their lives. Really, the person I'm most grateful to in my life is you. As long as you say the word, tell me to die, and I won't hesitate. After Fatso finished speaking, he raised his head and drank it in one gulp. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly, and also silently drank the wine in his glass. The second glass is also to you. To say something pretentious, boss, you're also my idol. You're responsible, I admire you, I worship you. If I were a woman, I would definitely rely on you. Fatso laughed. Haha. If you were a woman, then I would have to stay away from you. After all, your weight is not something I can bear. Qin Feiyang laughed. The others also roared with laughter. Whatever you say. Anyway, I'm a thick-skinned person. Otherwise, how could I find such a beautiful wife? In the eyes of others, I'm nothing, and they all say that I'm climbing up the social ladder. But I don't care because I know that Yenner loves me. In short, I want to toast you for giving me a different life. After Fatso finished speaking, he raised his head and drank it in one gulp. Actually, I also want to thank you. Thank everyone who used to be around me. For example, Lu Hong, White-Eyed Wolf, Ling Yunfei, Luo Qingzhu. It's because of your help, your encouragement, that I can be strong and walk to this day. Qin Feiyang said with a smile as he drank the wine in his cup. Fatty smiled and poured another cup of wine for him. As for the third glass, it's to our friendship. Although now I didn't accompany you to the ancient world, in my heart, I've always silently supported you and prayed for you. I sincerely hope that the relationship between us brothers can always be like this, never depreciating or changing. In short, no matter how time changes, no matter what happens, you'll always be my boss. Fatso smiled from the bottom of his heart. You'll always be my brother. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. Then let's toast to our rare brotherhood. Fatso laughed. Cheers. Qin Feiyang smiled. The two raised their heads and drank it in one gulp. After drinking, Fatso poured another glass, but this time he didn't look for Qin Feiyang, but for White-Eyed Wolf. Brother Wolf, although I've been bullied by you, I know that you're good to all of us. Thinking back, as long as we encountered difficulties, you were duty-bound. So thank you. And thank you for always accompanying my boss, so that he won't feel lonely. Fatso said. Since you know that I'm good to you, why don't you drink a few more glasses? White-Eyed Wolf said. Okay. I'll drink 3 glasses in a row to show my respect. Fatty laughed heartily as he downed cup after cup. Don't drink so much. Li Yin whispered. I'm happy. It's okay. Fatso waved his hand, his eyes a little blurry. A few hundred years for Qin Feiyang and White-Eyed Wolf was just a snap of the fingers, but for Fatso it was too long. Now that they finally gathered together, the joy in his heart was hard to extricate. Everyone looked at Fatso, and for a moment, they couldn't help but feel emotional. Although life became longer as one's cultivation increased, the time they spent together became less and less. So they should cherish every opportunity to get together. Because no one knew when the next time would be. Okay. Don't say sentimental words, just drink. I have more if it's not enough. Qin Feiyang smiled. Haha. Then we won't stand on ceremony. Old man Yi, aren't you very arrogant? Come on. The monkey-faced old man held a wine glass, looked at Yishu, and teased. Don't worry, you'll definitely go back tonight. Yishu glanced at him, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Feiyang, I'd like to toast you too. Thank you for taking care of Miss and Rishwang all these years. It's what I should do. Qin Feiyang smiled. There's no such thing as should, only willing. Some people don't even take their biological parents seriously. But you're different. Whether it's friends or family, you've always protected them with your life. There aren't many young people like you in this world. This old man admires you, Yishu said. Aren't you the same? Back then, it was you who had always protected great-grandmother and the others. I admire your greatness as well. In fact, we're all protecting the most important people. We don't ask for praise, we just want to have a clear conscience. Qin Feiyang smiled. What a good clear conscience. Just because you said clear conscience, this old man has to drink a few more glasses with you. Although I'm an old man, I also have a young heart. In terms of drinking, I won't lose to you young people. Come, let's not go home until we're drunk. Yishu laughed heartily. Qin Feiyang smiled, picked up the wine glass in front of him, and gently clinked it with Yishu's. Immediately, the two of them raised their heads and drank in one gulp. The atmosphere was very harmonious. Everyone said whatever they wanted, without any restrictions or concerns. The fragrance of wine, laughter, intertwined, forming a happy picture. Chapter 2808. The next morning, Qin Feiyang got up from a bed, rubbed his aching forehead, and looked around in confusion. Where was this? At this moment, he was in an unfamiliar bedroom. The decoration of the bedroom was quite luxurious. Outside the bedroom, there was a separate tea room, and an exquisite tea set was placed on the coffee table. Outside there was a restaurant. This should be a restaurant, Qin Feiyang mumbled. Because he didn't drink often, his alcohol tolerance was not good. In addition, everyone agreed in advance that he couldn't use divine power to refine the alcohol. So in the end, he was completely unconscious last night. He didn't know what happened next. He didn't know how he came to this room. I wonder how everyone is doing now. Qin Feiyang mumbled and shook his head hard. There was still a strong smell of alcohol on his body. Wait. My clothes, Qin Feiyang suddenly shivered. He looked down at himself and found that his clothes had been taken off. He quickly looked at the cabinet next to the bed and saw a coat neatly folded on top of it. Qin Feiyang grabbed it and sniffed it. There was a refreshing smell. Was this washed? Who washed it? Who was it that sent him here last night? Qin Feiyang put down the coat. With a head full of doubts, he got out of bed, walked to the bathroom in the corner, and took a cold shower. He suddenly became much more energetic. Although the wine is good, I can't drink too much. After putting on his clothes, Qin Feiyang went straight to the tea room and habitually made a pot of tea. The rich tea fragrance gradually covered the smell of alcohol in the room. Drinking tea is still the most comfortable. He held the teacup and drank a few mouthfuls in succession. He suddenly felt very comfortable. Then, he recalled what happened last night. Everyone drank a cup, especially Yishu, the monkey-faced old man, and the old man with the aquiline nose. They were originally wine lovers. In addition, the immortal intoxication was a peerless divine brew. Naturally, they couldn't help drinking. It seemed that in the end, they were all very drunk. But he really couldn't remember what happened next. Dong. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. He looked up at the door and said, "Come in." The door was pushed open. Fatso staggered in and looked at Qin Feiyang. He chuckled and said, "You're awake." "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. Such fragrant tea. Fatso's eyes lit up when he smelled the tea leaves. He quickly ran to the tea table and sat across from Qin Feiyang. He picked up the teapot and poured a cup of tea, tasting it carefully. Not bad, not bad. This tea is the best of the best. A short while later, Fatso nodded repeatedly. I say, not only are you good at drinking, you're also good at tasting tea? You, a scholar who has been away for 3 days, must be looked at with new eyes. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. There's no other way. Now that I'm managing the trading pavilion, drinking and tasting tea is my daily life. Fatso shook his head. Qin Feiyang laughed. Such a comfortable life. No wonder you've gained so much weight. If you say I'm fat again, I'll fall out with you. Fatso glared at Qin Feiyang. You're fat to begin with. Can't you let others say that? Qin Feiyang was speechless. Ignorant. Have you heard of a saying? Every fatso is a potential stock, just like me. Fatso said. Shameless. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him and asked, Where is this? Who sent me here last night? Still at the Longfeng Pavilion. Everyone drank too much last night, so they all slept at the Longfeng Pavilion. I just got up too. As for who sent you here, Fatso said with a sneaky smile, I'll tell you secretly. It's a woman. Woman. Qin Feiyang was stunned. It seemed that there were only a few women last night. Xiaojia definitely did not count. She was just a little girl. Li Yin was definitely not included. Then that left Fatso said, Don't think about it. The person who sent you here is Wang Yu or her? Qin Feiyang was stunned. How was it? A man and a woman were alone in a room. Did anything happen? Fatso smiled slyly. Alone in a room? Qin Feiyang was stunned. That's right. After Wang Yu sent you in, it was almost an hour before she came out. An hour can do a lot of things. Fatso said meaningfully. Get lost. It wasn't easy for me to end things with her. Don't kick up a fuss for me all day. Qin Feiyang glared at him angrily. I didn't kick up a fuss. At that time, she was also a little drunk. Think about it. A man and a woman alone in a drunken state. They even stayed together for an hour. Who would believe that they didn't do anything else? Fatso said. This. Hearing Fatso's words, Qin Feiyang's expression stiffened slightly. Did something happen? Qin Dage, don't listen to his nonsense. You didn't do anything last night. Suddenly, Fire Lotus's voice rang in Qin Feiyang's mind. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and quickly asked, How did you know? I was in the castle and could hear the sounds outside. At that time, Wang Yu just said a lot to you. Fire Lotus said. What did she say? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Nothing more than some words between a man and a woman. But the last words she said before she left made me very concerned. Fire Lotus said. What words? Qin Feiyang secretly asked. She said that she was leaving, and she might leave forever. When she said goodbye to you, she also said see you never again. Fire Lotus said. See you never again, Qin Feiyang murmured. Fire Lotus said. Do you think she would do something stupid? This, Qin Feiyang's expression stiffened. Fatso, who was sitting opposite, looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Boss, what are you doing? Where is Wang Yu now? Qin Feiyang came back to his senses and looked at Fatso and asked. She returned to the main tower last night. Fatso said. Qin Feiyang said. Go to the main tower immediately. Why? Don't tell me you really have something to do. Boss, I was just joking just now. Don't really get drunk, and do that. Fatso stared at Qin Feiyang in shock. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Hurry up and go. Qin Feiyang said angrily. Okay, I'll go now. Fatso shrunk his neck, hurriedly got up, opened a teleportation door and ran in. Don't do anything stupid. Qin Feiyang murmured, his face full of worry. But wasn't Wang Yu fine yesterday? And during the gathering last night, there was nothing unusual. Could it be that he and Fire Lotus were thinking too much? Wang Yu actually just went out to relax? But the word see you never again really made it difficult for him to calm down. Dong. Suddenly, there was another knock on the door. Qin Feiyang sorted out his emotions and looked at the door. Come in. Pei pushed the door open and walked in, looking at Qin Feiyang with a smile. Morning. Morning. Qin Feiyang smiled. Pei walked opposite Qin Feiyang, looked at the teacup left behind by Fatso on the table, and asked, Did someone come by just now? Fatso came by. Qin Feiyang smiled, washed a teacup, and poured Pei a cup of tea. Thank you. Pei smiled, took the teacup, and took a whiff of it. He couldn't help but praise. This tea is great. It's all right. Qin Feiyang nodded, a little distracted. After drinking the tea in the cup, Pei was instantly energized, but when he looked at Qin Feiyang again, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Something on your mind? Pei put down the teacup and asked with a smile. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded, hesitated for a while and finally told Pei about it. See you never again. Hearing this, Pei couldn't help but frown. Qin Feiyang asked, Do you think she'll really do something stupid? I think. After pondering for a while, Pei looked up at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, I don't think so. Are you sure? Qin Feiyang asked. I know Wang Yuer. She's not such a fragile woman. She might just want to completely let go of the past and welcome a new future. As for seeing you never again, I think she should be planning to stay outside for a long time. Pei guessed. After all, guesses were just guesses. Whoosh. At this moment, Fatso returned. How was it? Qin Feiyang asked. She really left, Fatso said. At this moment, Gong Sunbei also walked in, looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two, and asked with a smile, who left? This. Fatso was a little hesitant. What are you hiding from me? Gong Sunbei was curious. There's nothing to hide from you. It's Wang Yu. Fatso shook his head. You? Gong Sunbei was stunned and hurriedly asked, she left? Where did she go? I don't know. I went to the chief pagoda to look for her, but I only saw her parents. I heard from her parents that Wang Yu left alone before dawn. She said she wanted to go out for a walk and see the outside world. Fatso said. That's it. It's a good thing to go out for a walk. Why are you so nervous? Gong Sunbei was speechless. But the problem is, her parents said that she has to step down as the chief of the law enforcement hall. Fatso said. What? Gong Sunbei looked at Fatso, his face full of shock. That's what her parents said. Fatso said. Gong Sunbei frowned and said, why don't I know about it? You're the chief pagoda master, and she's your subordinate. If you don't know, how would I know? Fatso was speechless. This isn't this nonsense. She just needs to go out for a walk. What's the point of stepping down as the chief pagoda master? Gong Sunbei said angrily. I don't think her ambition lies in this. Qin Feiyang said. Actually, I know that she doesn't like managing the chief pagoda, but for such an important matter, she should at least inform me in advance. Gong Sunbei rubbed his forehead. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, as long as she's happy, it's fine. When she's happy, I have a headache. You all know the importance of the law enforcement hall in the chief pagoda. Who should I find to replace such an important position? Gong Sunbei had a headache. That's your problem. Fatso chuckled. The law enforcement hall was indeed important, because it was an existence that maintained order. As the chief of the law enforcement hall, one naturally had to have extraordinary ability. The most important thing was that one couldn't be selfish and had to trust someone. Where could one find such a person in a short time? Chapter 2809. Qin Feiyang glanced at Gong Sunbei, then looked at Fatso and asked, are you sure she's fine? She's fine. Wang Yu also expected that we would go to her, so she asked her parents to tell us that she has really let go and won't do anything stupid. Don't worry. Fatso waved his hand. That's good. Qin Feiyang finally heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that Wang Yu had also helped him wash his clothes. He drank too much last night, and inevitably got wine on his body, so she helped him wash it. What a meticulous woman. If he had met Wang Yu, before meeting the mermaid princess, he might have really gotten together with Wang Yu, because such a good woman was really hard to turn down. It could only be said that they were not fated to be together. Are you all up? Come down for breakfast if you're up. Li Yan's voice sounded in the hall below. Let's go then. Let's go for breakfast. Fatso called out, and turned to run outside. Pei chuckled and followed him out. Qin Feiyang finished the last sip of tea and walked to Gong Sunbei. He smiled and said, Brother Gongsun, what's there to think about? Isn't there a ready-made candidate in front of you? Huh? Gong Sunbei looked up at him suspiciously. Isn't he? Qin Feiyang looked at Pei in front of him and said in a low voice. Gong Sunbei looked up and a bright smile appeared on his face. Let's have something simple for breakfast. We'll have some millet porridge and some light dishes. Li Yan, who was busy going downstairs one after another, said with a smile. Something light is good. I drank too much last night. I really can't eat greasy food. The monkey-faced old man smiled bitterly. That's it. I'm still preparing. Let's compete in the morning. Yishu walked down and looked at the monkey-faced old man with a smile. Fine. I admit defeat. The monkey-faced old man waved his hand. Look at you. You're all so old. Why are you still so childish? The hook-nosed old man shook his head and came to the main hall. It's true that you're old, but your mentality must be young. But then again, the strength of the celestial immortal intoxication is truly terrifying. Even old men like us who have experienced hundreds of battles ended up drunk to the point of unconsciousness. Yishu shook his head. It's not that the strength of the immortal wine is terrifying, it's that you guys drank too much. You guys finished all the dozens of jars. It would be strange if you guys didn't get drunk. Li Yan came out with a few dishes. She was wearing an apron and looked very virtuous. You did all this? Yishu asked. Yes. Li Yan nodded. Yishu said, don't I have a chef in my restaurant? You only need to give an order. Why do you have to do it yourself? It's just breakfast. There's no need to trouble them. Li Yan smiled. Yishu smiled. All right, it's still early in the morning. Thank you for your hard work. It's nothing. Li Yan shook her head. Yishu turned to look at Fatso and said, look, what a good wife. Cherish her. Do I need you to tell me that? Fatso pursed his lips. Haha. Yishu laughed and said, then let's eat. The group of people looked at each other and smiled. They sat around the table and enjoyed the delicious morning meal. After eating, Fatso leaned back in his chair calmly. He looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, Boss, what are we going to do next? Next? Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and said with a smile, I came to the Forgotten Continent this time to visit all of you. Now that I've seen how well all of you are doing, I should go back and accompany my mother. You should also accompany her, because the person who has missed you the most all these years is your mother. Fatso nodded. Li Yan asked, when are you going back? Now. Qin Feiyang said. Now. That's too fast. Fatso was stunned. I'm not leaving the Great Qin Empire. If there's time in the future, we can meet at any time. Qin Feiyang said. Fatso was slightly stunned and nodded with a smile. That's true. All right then. Qin Feiyang stood up and looked at everyone with a smile. Let's meet again another day. We'll send you off. Everyone also stood up. Qin Feiyang glanced at the group of people and nodded. Okay. At that moment, Fatso, Pei Yi, and Wang Zicheng each opened a teleportation door. Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf changed their appearances again. Very soon, a group of people descended above the Pill Pagoda square. The disciples on the square sensed their auras and immediately looked up. Their pupils suddenly shrank. It's this man and dog again. Who are they? Not only did the chief pagoda master and the others personally accompany them, but even the pavilion master and Situ Tianyu are also present. I heard that the Longfeng Pavilion closed for business last night. Could it be that they were entertaining them? The disciples were bewildered. Greetings, Chief Pagoda Master. Greetings, lords. Elder He, who was guarding the altar, also hurriedly stood up and bowed to the group of people. You can go about your business. The monkey-faced old man waved his hand. Yes. Elder He replied respectfully. Then he looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf, turned around, and walked up to the chief pagoda. Pei Yi cupped his hands and smiled. Brother Qin, I'll send you off here. Come visit the Great Qin Empire when you're free. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. I'll definitely go. Pei Yi smiled. Qin Feiyang swept his eyes over them one by one. He wanted to remember all these familiar faces in his heart forever. Go. Yishu waved his hand. You're not going to the 9th region with us? The white-eyed wolf asked. No. Later, let Gong Sun Bei choose another person to guard the altar in the 9th region. As for me, with the spirit vein and crystal vein, I naturally have to hurry to the land of inheritance to cultivate in seclusion. Yishu smiled. You're the only one who's anxious. The white-eyed wolf despised him. Yishu's face darkened. He said impatiently, cut the crap and get lost. You're burning the bridge after crossing it. How heartless. The white-eyed wolf shook his head and sighed. Seeing this, everyone burst into laughter. Then I'll take my leave. Qin Feiyang also shook his head and smiled. Then he cupped his hands at everyone and stepped onto the altar with the white-eyed wolf, Lu Xiaofei and Qin Shen. The monkey-faced old man waved his hand, and a stream of divine power flowed into the altar, which immediately revived. Wait! Suddenly, Qin Feiyang seemed to have thought of something and looked at Situ Feiyang. Situ Feiyang chuckled and said, "Uncle, you won't miss me, right? Don't be like this, I'll be shy." The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. He looked at Fatso and Li Yan and said, "Give this kid to me." "Give him to you for what?" Li Yan was suspicious. "Your woman is really stupid. Since boss said that, he must want to cultivate this brat." "This is great news." Fatso glared at Li Yan, looked at Qin Feiyang, and waved his hand. "Just take him away." "How can you be a father like this?" Situ Feiyang looked at Fatso with dissatisfaction. "What do you know? To be able to be cultivated by your uncle. That's the merit of your previous life. It's also because your mother and I have done too many good things. Now it's all on you," Fatso said. "Shameless," Situ Feiyang muttered. Li Yan also understood. She looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. "Then I'll leave him to you. You can beat him to death or cripple him." "I'll go." "Am I your biological child?" Situ Feiyang looked at the couple angrily. "Don't say it. You're really not our biological child. We picked you up from the river." Fatso pursed his lips. "Fine, you win." Situ Feiyang snorted coldly. Having such a father, he was full of bitterness. He walked up the altar helplessly. Qin Feiyang and Situ Feiyang couldn't help but shake their heads and smile. With a wave of his hand, 10 crystal veins and spirit veins appeared. He looked at Fatty and Li Yan and said, "These are for you." "Thank you, boss." Fatso smiled. Qin Feiyang took out 10 legendary divine artifacts and 10 supreme divine arts. "Brother Gongsun Bei, I gave you the spirit veins and crystal veins yesterday, as well as the divine artifacts and divine arts. Take these." "Okay." Gongsun Bei was not as polite as yesterday. "Then we'll meet again," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "Go, go." Everyone waved their hands. The sacrificial altar revived again, and Qin Feiyang's group quickly disappeared. "Brother Gongsun Bei, are we brothers?" The fatty retracted his gaze and looked at the 10 divine weapons and the 10 divine arts with shifty eyes. Then he moved closer to Gongsun Bei and grinned. Cut it out. How could Gongsun Bei not know him? He put away the divine artifacts and divine arts immediately. Stingy. Fatso looked at Gongsun Bei with disdain and said, "Wife, let's go." Li Yan shook her head and smiled. She turned to Li He and said, "Grandpa, Tianyu and I will go to the trading pavilion. You take these spirit veins and crystal veins back and put them away." "Okay." Li He nodded. After Fatso and Li Yan left, Li He smiled at Gongsun Bei and the others and immediately left with the 10 spirit veins and crystal veins. "Then I'll take my leave too." Pei Yi smiled. "Don't be in such a hurry." Gongsun Bei grabbed him. "What?" Pei Yi looked at him suspiciously. Gongsun Bei smiled and said, "I have something to discuss with you." "What is it?" Pei Yi looked at him warily, feeling like a weasel greeting a chicken. "Don't be nervous. It's not a good thing, but it's not a bad thing either. See, you resigned as the hall master of the law enforcement hall. Now the law enforcement hall has no leader. And Wang Zicheng and the others don't have the time to manage this, so..." Gongsun Bei looked at Pei Yi with a smile. Pei Yi looked at Gongsun Bei in shock. It was obvious that he wanted him to enter the main tower and be the hall master. "What did you say? You resigned as the hall master? When did this happen? Why didn't we know?" Yi Shu, the monkey-faced old man, the hook-nosed old man, and Wang Zicheng all looked at Gongsun Bei in shock. Qin Feiyang, Gongsun Bei, and Fatso didn't mention this at the dinner table, so everyone was still in the dark. "I'll explain it to you later." Gongsun Bei looked at everyone and comforted them. Then he looked at Pei Yi again and said, "You're capable and responsible. Your strength is one of the best in the Forgotten Continent. You're the talent that the main tower needs." "Stop." Pei Yi hurriedly raised his hand and interrupted Gongsun Bei. He looked around and said, "We'll meet again if fate wills it." After saying this, he turned and ran away without looking back. "This guy." Gongsun Bei's mouth twitched, Then a smile appeared on his face. No matter what, he had to get this guy to join the main tower. Chapter 28:10. The Ninth Area. After Qin Feiyang and his group appeared, they did not delay and directly left Ice Crystal City. Situ Feiyang looked at Qin Feiyang and asked suspiciously, "Uncle, are you really going to teach me? Looking at your expression, you seem to be a little unhappy?" Qin Feiyang was puzzled. No. Situ Feiyang quickly waved his hand and laughed. "I just heard Qin Chen and Brother Shao Jie say before that your way of teaching people is a little inhumane." Cough cough. Qin Chen coughed dryly and stared at Situ Feiyang. "When did I say that? You forgot so quickly? 3 years ago, at the end of the year, we gathered together. You and Brother Shao Jie said that Uncle Qin trained you guys, and tortured you guys to death." Situ Feiyang said. Qin Chen's face darkened. Did this little fatso not understand his expression? He even said it. Qin Feiyang glanced at Qin Chen. We. Qin Chen's expression was rather flustered. Qin Feiyang laughed. "Don't panic, after all this is the truth." "Don't panic? How was that possible?" Looking at the smile on Qin Feiyang's face, he knew that something bad was about to happen. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang stopped and looked at Qin Chen. "Do you know why I brought you along?" Qin Chen shook his head. "The reason is very simple. I just want you to understand how strong the white-eyed wolf and I are now." "You should understand it well now," Qin Feiyang said. Qin Chen nodded. Whether it was the soul vein, crystal vein, divine artifact, divine art, or the white-eyed wolf's strength that defeated Wang Zicheng and the others with one claw, it was all beyond imagination. "Then let me tell you now, Mu Qing's current cultivation is stronger than me and the white-eyed wolf. Do you still plan to take revenge?" Qin Feiyang asked. "Never wavered," Qin Chen said. Qin Feiyang looked at him deeply and asked, "Then are you willing to go to the ancient world with me?" "I'm willing," Qin Chen replied without hesitation, his eyes burning with passion. "All right. I'll bring you to the ancient realm and nurture you with all my might. But remember, don't disappoint me," Qin Feiyang said. "I will definitely work hard." Qin Chen nodded. "All right." Qin Feiyang glanced at the four of them and smiled. "Now I'll take you to a place." After saying that, Qin Feiyang waved his hand and brought the four of them to appear above the desert of death. "Where is this?" The four of them scanned their surroundings in bewilderment. "I believe your fathers or elders have all told you that I have a black tortoise realm," Qin Feiyang said. "Yes." Situ Feiyang nodded. "It was said that the black tortoise world was an independent small world." "This is the black tortoise realm," Qin Feiyang said. "This is the black tortoise realm?" The four of them were filled with surprise. No wonder it was so big that they couldn't see the end. "Xiaojia, the following process will be quite painful. It might even make you go crazy. You're still young, so you don't have to participate for the time being." Qin Feiyang looked at Lu Xiaojia and smiled. Lu Xiaojia glanced at the desert below and shook her head. "Uncle, I'm not a child anymore. I'm not afraid." "Really?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. "Yes." Lu Xiaojia nodded heavily. "All right." Qin Feiyang smiled and brought Fire Lotus over from the Devil's Land. "What a beautiful sister. Uncle, I didn't expect you to keep a mistress in a golden house." Situ Feiyang stared at Fire Lotus, his eyes filled with amazement. "Keeping a mistress in a golden house?" Qin Feiyang's face darkened as he smacked Situ Feiyang's head. Fire Lotus couldn't help but laugh. These little guys, each more interesting than the other. Qin Feiyang looked at Fire Lotus and asked, "It's been 2 days. How are Qin Haoyan and the others?" "Not bad. Qin Haoyan's cultivation has already reached the level of war god. Qin Yun, Qin Ji, Qin Xian, and Qin Wan have all reached the level of 9-star combat emperor. Qin Yi, the twins have also reached the level of 9-star combat saint." Fire Lotus said. "What? Uncle Haoyan has already reached the level of war god?" Lu Xiaofei and his sister were dumbfounded. "What's going on?" Situ Feiyang was also very surprised. Of course he knew Qin Haoyan and the others. He had even met them before the new year, so he knew their cultivation. But how did they become war gods and combat emperors in the blink of an eye? Even Qin Yi and Qin Yi, the two little guys, had already broken through to the level of 9-star combat saint. This speed was too freakish, wasn't it? However, Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "It's been 2 days, but they've only grown so little. It seems a bit slow. 1 day was 1,000 years. 2 days was 2,000 years. And there were so many pills and resources. 2,000 years was enough to cultivate a monarch god." Slow. Qin Chun and the others heard this and the corners of their mouths twitched. If this was slow, then what was fast? "I slowed them down on purpose," Fire Lotus said with a smile. "Why?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "They're still young. I'm afraid that if they break through too quickly, their mental state will be unstable. So every time they break through a level, I will let them leave the Devil's Land and go out to explore. Otherwise, Qin Haoyan would have already become a monarch god." Fire Lotus said. "So it's like that." Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, "I really didn't think about this problem. You're different from me. I'm the palace master of 9 Heaven Palace. I know how to teach people how to cultivate. Although we've given them the best cultivation environment and resources, they still have to fight steadily." Fire Lotus said. "All right." Qin Feiyang nodded and pointed at Qin Chun and the others. "Then these 4 little ones, I'll leave them to you." "No problem." Fire Lotus nodded. Qin Feiyang turned to look at the 4 of them and said with a smile, "Then you guys, take care of yourselves." After saying that, he and the white-eyed wolf disappeared without a trace. Where did Uncle and Uncle Wolf go? Lu Xiaojia immediately looked around. Fire Lotus said, "They should have gone to the Devil's Land." "Devil's Land? What is that place?" The 4 of them were curious. "The Devil's Land is not a place you can set foot in. Hand over the Qianquan bag, and let's begin," Fire Lotus said. Devil's Land. Somewhere in the southern mountain range, 7 young men and women sat cross-legged on the ground. They were all handsome and had a dignified appearance. The 7 of them were Qin Haoyan, Qin Yun, Qin Wan, Qin Xian, Qin Ji, Qin Yi, and Qin Yi. Shua. Suddenly, a man and a wolf appeared in the void above. It was Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf. They had also recovered their true appearance. And Qin Haoyan and the others also noticed their auras at the first moment. They opened their eyes and looked up. The changes are quite big. Qin Feiyang looked down at the 7 of them. After 2,000 years in the Black Tortoise world, Qin Haoyan, Qin Yun, Qin Wan, Qin Xian, and Qin Ji had all become mature and steady. Especially Qin Haoyan. He was like a natural emperor with an extraordinary temperament. Qin Yi and Qin Yi were no longer the 2 brats from before. Qin Yi's height was now 1.8 meters. His figure was tall and straight, and there was a shocking sharpness between his eyebrows. As for Qin Yi, she was also about 1.75 meters. Her black hair draped over her shoulders, and her exquisite figure revealed a breathtaking beauty. "Big brother." Seeing Qin Feiyang appear, Qin Yun and the others quickly stood up and bowed. Qin Haoyan also stood up, but did not speak. He stared at Qin Feiyang, and a trace of fighting spirit burned in his eyes. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, "Seeing that you are all still alive, I am quite gratified." They looked at each other, their faces full of wry smiles. Although only 2 days had passed outside, they had already cultivated here for 2,000 years. Especially in the beginning, crossing the desert of death, it was simply a narrow escape. To be able to survive until now, even they themselves felt that it was not easy. Of course, they also knew, if Qin Feiyang really did not care about their lives, then they would have died in the desert of death long ago. Because countless times when they faced death, it was Fire Lotus who saved them. And with these 2,000 years in the Black Tortoise world, they had long had a new understanding of Qin Feiyang. Their big brother was a godlike figure. So, right now they respected Qin Feiyang even more than before. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, looked at Qin Haoyan and said, "Looking at your eyes, do you want to challenge me?" "That's right." Qin Haoyan took a step into the sky and stood opposite Qin Feiyang. "All right. Let me see how much you've grown over the years." Qin Feiyang smiled slightly, suppressing his cultivation to the level of a war god. Who do you think will win? Qin Xian asked in a low voice. Needless to say, it will definitely be Big Brother. Qin Yin said. Sister Yin, I think it might be Brother Hao Yin. After all, he works so hard. And now, Big Brother has also suppressed his cultivation to the same level as Brother Hao Yin. Qin said, losing her childish and mischievous attitude from before, appearing natural and unrestrained. No matter how hard he works, he won't be able to defeat Big Brother. Big Brother, that is the undefeated legend. Qin Ji opened his mouth and raised his head to look at Qin Feiyang. He had absolute confidence in Qin Feiyang. Let's begin. High up in the sky, Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Haoyan and said with a faint smile, boom. Qin Haoyan's aura suddenly erupted. He took a step forward and blasted towards Qin Feiyang. But in this regard, Qin Feiyang didn't dodge at all, nor did he have any intention of fighting back. Boom. Qin Haoyan's punch landed solidly on Qin Feiyang's chest. But Qin Feiyang didn't even take a step back. His entire person was like Mount Tai, standing there. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, Are you tickling me? Qin Haoyan was stunned. What was going on? Didn't he already suppress his cultivation to the same level? Why couldn't he cause any damage to the other party with his full strength? What a naive kid. White-eyed Wolf shook his head. With the strength of Qin Feiyang's physical body, not to mention the same level, even if Qin Feiyang suppressed his cultivation to the pseudo-god realm, Qin Haoyan wouldn't be able to hurt him at all. Strong indeed. Qin Ji clenched his fists. This Big Brother was the goal he wanted to pursue. Let's continue. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Haoyan and said with a faint smile. Roar. Qin Haoyan formed a seal with both hands, accompanied by a loud dragon roar. The first, second, and third moves of the Dragon God technique appeared one after another. Not bad. Qin Feiyang nodded. Not only did he inherit the Dragon God technique, but he had also upgraded it to the mid-tier divine technique level. Emperor Prison. Qin Haoyan roared again. A purple gold dragon soul roared out from behind him. Purple gold dragon soul? Emperor Prison. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He even activated the purple gold dragon soul. No wonder this kid could awaken his bloodline. And this Emperor Prison. Qin Haoyan actually obtained this innate ability. Interesting. Chapter 28:11. Forgive me for the mistakes I made back then. Qin Haoyan let out a low roar. The three moves of the Divine Dragon Art and the Purple Gold Dragon Soul, carrying a powerful aura, charged towards Qin Feiyang. Forgive me. If you really want to talk about forgiveness, it should be for your mother. Qin Feiyang shook his head, still standing there motionlessly. The three moves of the Divine Dragon Art and the Purple Gold Dragon Soul instantly drowned Qin Feiyang. However, when all the dust settled, Qin Feiyang's body was still unscathed. So strong. Big Brother's body must be made of iron. Below, Qin Xian and the others were dumbfounded. Qin Haoyan also looked at Qin Feiyang in a daze. This was his strength. Even if he suppressed his cultivation, even if he stood there motionless, he couldn't hurt him at all. Roar. Suddenly, accompanied by a series of ear-splitting dragon roars, the three moves of the Divine Dragon Art appeared once again. But this was not Qin Haoyan's Divine Dragon Art, but Qin Feiyang's Divine Dragon Art. A terrifying dragon's might spread in all directions. This is also the Divine Dragon Art. Brother Haoyan's Divine Dragon Art is not on the same level as Big Brother's Divine Dragon Art. Under the envelopment of the dragon's might, Qin Xian and the others all felt a great pressure, feeling as if they were ants. Qin Haoyan's mind also trembled. They were both Divine Dragon Art, but the other party's Divine Dragon Art was actually so much stronger? Supreme Divine Dragon Art, experience it. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, and the three moves of the Divine Dragon Art fell with a loud bang. Qin Haoyan immediately felt the aura of death. Facing Qin Feiyang's Divine Dragon Art, he actually didn't even have the courage to fight back. Just as the three divine arts were about to drown Qin Haoyan, they suddenly stopped above Qin Haoyan's head. The divine might enveloped Jiang Haoyan, causing his heart to panic and feel helpless. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, Now you understand the gap between us. Qin Haoyan raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang. After a long time, he slowly lowered his head and sighed. No matter how hard he tried, it was impossible for him to defeat his elder brother. This was the gap between them that could not be crossed. Don't be discouraged. One day maybe you can. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and waved his hand. The 3 styles of the Dragon God technique disappeared. I didn't expect it to be so easy. Qin Xian shook his head. I've said it before. Big Brother is an invincible legend. Qin Ji raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang, his eyes blazing. I finally understand why all the civil and military officials in the imperial court and everyone in the imperial palace are so respectful of Big Brother. Although he is not an emperor, he is the true emperor in everyone's hearts. As long as he exists, Great Qin will exist. Qin Yun and the others also had looks of admiration on their faces. They were proud to have such a big brother. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Haoyan and transmitted his voice. I'll say one more thing. Qin Haoyan looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang. In the past, don't say that I was wrong and ask me to forgive you. I'm not wrong. The one who should be forgiven is you. Because it was your mother who did not abide by the virtues of a wife, betrayed your father, and betrayed the Qin bloodline. You should know this in your heart. All these years, no one mentioned this matter because they were considering your feelings and didn't want you to bear too much. Qin Feiyang thought. Qin Haoyan clenched his hands and his face became a little twisted. You've grown up and are no longer the little brat back then. You should learn to face it bravely. Likewise, you should learn to let it go. Otherwise, your state of mind will be affected sooner or later. I don't need to tell you how important the state of mind is to a cultivator. If your state of mind is affected, it will be difficult to even catch up to me, let alone surpass me. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Qin Haoyan said in a deep voice, even if she was wrong, she is still my birth mother. I can understand. But what happened in the past has become a fact. No one can erase it. You can only try to forget and let it go. Qin Feiyang thought. Huff. Qin Haoyan took a deep breath and looked at Qin Feiyang, coldly snorting. Don't be too proud. I will continue to work hard and defeat you sooner or later. I'll say the same thing again. I'm looking forward to it. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Big brother, you're really amazing. Can you teach us cultivation personally? Qin Yi ran up and hugged Qin Feiyang's arm, giggling. I'll teach you? Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, saying, in this aspect, I'm really not as good as Fire Lotus. Stingy. I think you think we're troublesome. Qin Yi pouted. It's indeed troublesome. Qin Feiyang chuckled. Big brother. Qin Yi stomped her feet in anger. Haha. Qin Feiyang laughed heartily. He looked at the group of people and said, your cultivation ends here. Ends here? Everyone was stunned. I'll be responsible for laying a good foundation for you. The rest will depend on your luck. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Qin Xian frowned. Big brother, are you chasing us out? You can say that. In short, you can't rely on me too much. After all, I'll leave sooner or later. Let's talk about it later. Your current cultivation is enough to establish a foothold in Great Qin and Forgotten Continent. Qin Feiyang laughed. Don't, big brother. It wasn't easy for us to pass Sister Fire Lotus's test and come to the Devil's Land. Just let us stay for a few more days. At least wait for us to break through to the War God realm. Qin Yi hurriedly opened his mouth, his eyes full of pleading. Qin Yi, Qin Xian, Qin Yun, Qin Ji, and Qin Wan were the same. Initially, in the Desert of Death, they really wanted to escape. But now, they had already fallen in love with this place. Not for anything else, but for the cultivation environment and resources here. For example, this time formation. 1,000 years in a day. If it was in the past, this was something they wouldn't even dare to think about. Not to mention Qin Xian and the others, even Qin Haoyan was reluctant to leave now. Qin Feiyang looked at the few of them, smiled helplessly and nodded. All right, I'll give you 2 more days. Thank you, big brother. The few of them were wild with joy. Qin Haoyan was also secretly delighted. 2 days of time was completely enough for him to break through to the Divine Lord realm. Divine Lord. In the entire Great Qin and Forgotten Continent, only Yuan Bo and the Snow Python were at this level. At that time, he would be the third person. Young master. Suddenly, along with a shout, Dan Wangkai hurriedly ran over. Qin Feiyang looked at Dan Wangkai and waved to Qin Haoyan and the others. You guys go and cultivate first. The few of them nodded, looked at Dan Wangkai suspiciously and flew down. Look at how anxious you are. Did something happen? Qin Feiyang looked at Dan Wangkai and asked. Dan Wangkai lowered his head and looked at Qin Feiyang and the others, then pulled Qin Feiyang to the other side and said in a low voice, Young master, do you still remember the disaster crossing heavenly pill? What is the disaster crossing heavenly pill? The one who spoke was the white-eyed wolf. Dan Wangkai was so mysterious, of course it would be interested, so it followed him. Dan Wangkai said, Brother Wolf, just listen, you'll understand later. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, then asked, Are you talking about the disaster crossing heavenly pill recorded in the pill scripture? Yes. Dan Wangkai nodded. Qin Feiyang laughed and asked, Then how is your research going? According to my research, I came to a conclusion that this disaster crossing heavenly pill has the ability to break all curses. Dan Wangkai said excitedly. The ability to break all curses? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes. Dan Wangkai took out a jade box from his arms and handed it to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang opened the jade box and looked inside. Surprisingly, there were 3 dazzling golden pills inside. There were also 3 dragon-shaped pill chi lingering around them. This is the disaster crossing heavenly pill? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Yes. When I went to the medicine field to check, I found that there were ready-made medicinal herbs, so I refined 3 pills. Dan Wangkai nodded. Qin Feiyang looked at the 3 pills curiously. A pill to break the curse? What was the use of this? Dan Wangkai said. Young master, isn't the snow python cursed? Yes. Qin Feiyang patted his head. Dan Wangkai said, I want to see if this disaster-crossing heavenly pill is useful or not. Break the curse, Qin Feiyang muttered. In that case, could the curse on Yuan Bo's body also be broken? Immediately, Qin Feiyang realized the importance of the disaster-crossing heavenly pill, and said, let's go find the snow python now. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and left the Black Tortoise realm with the white-eyed wolf and Dan Wangkai, immediately rushing to the glacier forest. With their speed, they could cross the 9 regions in a dozen breaths, so there was no need to open a portal or something like that. Beside the frozen lake, Dong Zhengyang sat on the snow. The snow python had become half a meter long, and half of its body was lying on Dong Zhengyang's lap. It looked extremely harmonious. The white-eyed wolf joked, I haven't seen you for hundreds of years and you're just like this? Dong Zhengyang and the snow python were stunned. They raised their heads and looked at the white-eyed wolf, speechless. Then what do you think we should do? Do you need me to remind you? Of course, let the snow python transform into a human form, and find a place to do something that a man and a woman should do. The white-eyed wolf said. Dong Zhengyang immediately smiled bitterly. This wolf cub was getting more and more improper. Cut the crap. Qin Feiyang landed in front of Dong Zhengyang and the snow python, looked at the snow python, and then looked at Dong Zhengyang, and said, I might be able to break the curse on her body. Dong Zhengyang was stunned, and then suddenly stood up and asked in surprise, What did you say? Qin Feiyang said, I said I might be able to break her curse. Can break the curse, Dong Zhengyang muttered, and suddenly came back to his senses. He stared at Qin Feiyang and asked, Really? The snow python also stared at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Breaking this curse was what she had been longing for and looking forward to. It could be imagined. Now that she heard Qin Feiyang's words, she was nervous and expectant. Qin Feiyang hesitated. I just said. Maybe. No need to explain. Dong Zhengyang waved his hand and said, Even if there is only a little hope, I want to give it a try. All right. Qin Feiyang opened the jade box in his hand, took out a crossing disaster heavenly pill, and handed it to Dong Zhengyang, saying, This pill is called Crossing Disaster Heavenly Pill, and it was refined by Dan Wangkai. It has the effect of breaking all curses. But speaking of which, Qin Feiyang paused and sighed. You also know that the curse in the snow python's body was, after all, left by a small beast, so I don't have much confidence. Understood. Dong Zhengyang nodded, took the pill without hesitation, turned around and handed it to the snow python's mouth. Chapter 28:12. However, looking at the elixir in front of it, the snow python hesitated. Don't worry. If Qin Feiyang wanted to harm you, he wouldn't use such a trick. Dong Zhengyang laughed. We helped you out of kindness, but you still suspect us? The white-eyed wolf raised his eyebrows. No. The snow python quickly shook its head and sighed. I'm not suspecting this elixir. With Qin Feiyang's current strength, it was too easy to kill her. Besides, she knew Qin Feiyang's character. He didn't bother to do anything to the elixir. Then why are you hesitating? Dong Zhengyang was suspicious. The snow python said, I'm afraid it won't work. So that's the case. Dong Zhengyang nodded and laughed. If you don't try it, how do you know it won't work? But what if it doesn't work? The snow python asked. It doesn't matter, because there's still me. I'll keep looking for a way. Dong Zhengyang laughed. The snow python pondered for a while and resolutely took the disaster-crossing heavenly pill. At that moment, everyone stared at the snow python, especially Qin Feiyang. If this disaster-crossing heavenly pill was really useful, then not only the snow python, but also Uncle Yuan could break the curse. Puff. Suddenly, the snow python's body shook violently, and it spat out a mouthful of blood. What's going on? Dan Wangkai was surprised. Was it useless? Don't worry. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and stared at the snow python. Puff. In less than 3 breaths, the snow python spat out another mouthful of blood. Boom. Then, her aura burst out uncontrollably. But this was not the point. The point was that as the aura burst out, her body began to crack. Blood flowed like a waterfall, instantly dyeing the snow on the ground red. Qin Feiyang, this. Dong Zhengyang turned to look at Qin Feiyang, looking extremely anxious. Wasn't this a sign of exploding and dying? Is it really impossible? Qin Feiyang murmured. Dan Wangkai quickly took out a life divine pellet with 3 dragon-shaped core qi and shouted, Quick, feed it to her. Dong Zhengyang quickly grabbed the divine life pill and threw it into the snow python's mouth. Ding. But at this moment, the snow python's face was filled with pain as it soared into the sky. Its blood was like rain, dyeing the sky red. The next moment, the snow python let out a loud dragon roar. This is, Dong Zhengyang's eyes trembled. A dragon's roar. It works. It will definitely work. Dan Wangkai also quivered and shouted loudly. Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf looked at each other, and then looked at the snow python again. Since the dragon's roar could be heard, it meant that the curse was beginning to dissipate. Boom. About 10 breaths passed. The snow python that was floating in the air suddenly exploded with a loud, muffled sound. It was as if some kind of shackle had been broken. At this moment, a vast and mighty dragon might poured out like a torrent, surging out in all directions with an earth-shattering force. Ding! The dragon's roar became louder and louder. The people of the Sky Tiger tribe and the Wang clan outside the glacier forest all heard the dragon's roar. What's the situation? A divine dragon has been born? It seems to be in the direction of the ice lake. Let's go and take a look. A group of people immediately flew towards the glacier forest. At this moment, Dong Zhengyang's eyes were already filled with a layer of mist, because the snow python was changing at this moment. On its head, 2 dragon horns slowly grew out, and the snake scales on its body turned into dragon scales one by one. Its body, which was originally half a meter long, had now become hundreds of feet long. Below its abdomen, 4 white dragon claws gradually emerged. It really is a white dragon, Dan Wangkai murmured. After more than 10 breaths, the snow python completely disappeared, and was replaced by a white dragon that looked incomparably majestic. The crossing disaster heavenly pill is useful. Qin Feiyang was also murmuring, his heart was incomparably excited. Calm down. Although she has recovered her white dragon body, I still don't know if the curse of her cultivation has been broken. The white-eyed wolf whispered. Hearing the white-eyed wolf's words, Dong Zhengyang immediately soared into the air, flew in front of the snow python, and asked, "How do you feel?" "It's been too long since I've felt so free," the snow python muttered. It seemed that it was still a little unable to adapt to all of this. However, that painful expression had disappeared. Dong Zhengyang laughed. "You're not dreaming, this is real." "Is that so?" the white dragon asked. "Yes." Dong Zhengyang nodded. "Finally. I've finally broken the curse." Ding! The white dragon roared towards the sky, venting the grievances that had accumulated over the years. Dong Zhengyang could not help but shed tears. White dragon. At this time, a group of people flew over. When they saw the white python in the sky, their eyes immediately widened. It was Yan Wei, Wang Xiaojie, Wang Yangfeng and the others. "Young master." "Master?" When they saw Qin Feiyang not far away, a group of people immediately flew over. Wang Xiaojie looked at the white dragon suspiciously and asked, "Master, where did this white dragon come from?" "She is the snow python." Qin Feiyang laughed. "She is the snow python?" Everyone was stunned. Yan Wei hurriedly said, "Young master, isn't she cursed? How can she restore the white dragon's body?" "Her curse has been broken." Qin Feiyang smiled. "It has been broken." Yan Wei and the others murmured, looking at the white dragon again. A trace of a smile could not help but crawl into their eyes. Although the white dragon had made things difficult for them in the past, it had been very good to them in the past few hundred years. So now that the white dragon had broken the curse, they were sincerely happy for the white dragon. Dong Zhengyang glanced at Yan Wei and the others, wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes, and looked at the white dragon. All right, let's see if you can cultivate now." "All right." The white dragon nodded, trying to calm itself down, and then closed its eyes. About 10 breaths passed. The white dragon suddenly opened its eyes and said in surprise, "I can already cultivate, and even if the curse is broken, my half-step divine lord cultivation has not disappeared." "Really?" Dong Zhengyang asked. The white dragon nodded. "That's great." Dong Zhengyang was overjoyed, and hurriedly landed in front of Qin Feiyang, cupped his hands and said, "Brother Qin, I can't thank you enough. If there's anything in the future, just let me know." "Thank you." The white dragon also transformed into a fair-skinned and beautiful woman in a white dress, landing beside Dong Zhengyang, looking at Qin Feiyang gratefully, and said. Qin Feiyang glanced at the two of them and said with a smile, "We are all old friends, no need to be so polite." "Old friends," the white dragon murmured. Qin Feiyang's words made her feel ashamed. Qin Feiyang said suspiciously, "I heard you say that your cultivation has not disappeared. What do you mean? You also know that whether it's me or Qin Yuan, before we became guardians, we were not half-step divine lords." The white dragon said. "I know. Back then, Uncle Yuan said that it was the small beast that raised your cultivation to half-step divine lords." Qin Feiyang nodded. "So, originally, I thought that after breaking the curse, my cultivation would fall back to its original level. But now my cultivation has not disappeared," the white dragon said. "Is that so?" Qin Feiyang suddenly understood and said with a smile. "In that case, it seems that it's a blessing in disguise." "A blessing in disguise?" The white dragon shook its head and sighed. "Even if you give me the cultivation of the imperishable realm, I don't want to be haunted by this curse anymore." "You won't." Dong Zhengyang grabbed the white dragon's hand and said with a smile. The white dragon nodded, tears flowing down its cheeks again. The white-eyed wolf quivered and turned to Qin Feiyang urging, "Little Qin Zi, what are you waiting for? Hurry back to the great Qin Empire and find Uncle Yuan." Yes. Let's go find Uncle Yuan." Qin Feiyang also came back to his senses. He did not even bother to run to the teleportation altar under the ice lake, and directly took out the space-time gate. Clang! With the emergence of divine power, the space-time gate immediately awakened. Qin Feiyang, the white-eyed wolf, and Dan Wangkai immediately ran in. "Let's go and take a look." Dong Zhengyang smiled at the white dragon, and then the two entered the space-time gate hand in hand. You all go back to. Yan Wei and Wang Yangfeng instructed their clansmen behind them and rushed into the space-time gate. Of course, Wang Xiaojie would not let go of this opportunity to join in the fun. Imperial capital. In the sky above a sea area of the Sea of Reincarnation, Qin Feiyang and the others appeared one after another. After putting away the space-time gate, Qin Feiyang immediately released his divine telekinesis in all directions. Now his divine telekinesis was enough to cover the entire imperial capital, including the Sea of Reincarnation. He sensed a familiar aura on a small island. Swoosh. Following closely, Qin Feiyang waved his hand, swept everyone up, and rushed to the sky above the small island like lightning. The island was only about a few miles in size, but the island was full of birds and flowers. In the center of the small island, there was an inconspicuous small wooden building. The wooden building was only 2 stories high and looked very old, but it was very clean. In front of the wooden building, there was a round stone table. Around the stone table, there were 4 stone stools, and it looked very simple. A white-haired old man over 50 years old sat at the table, leisurely drinking tea. The old man was dressed very plainly, and there was no aura on his body. He looked like a country bumpkin. However, looking at the old man, whether it was Qin Feiyang, Yan Wei, or the others, they were all full of respect. Uncle Yuan. Qin Feiyang called out softly. Qin Yuan raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang, as if he was not surprised, and said with a smile, "You're here." Qin Feiyang nodded, landed beside the stone table, and directly knelt on the ground. "Get up." Qin Yuan got up and helped Qin Feiyang up and said with a smile, "Come, let Uncle Yuan take a good look. After these few hundred years, have there been any changes?" Qin Feiyang giggled. "Without a doubt, I have become more handsome and charming than before." Perhaps only in front of Qin Yuan would Qin Feiyang reveal such a childish side. Haha. Qin Yuan could not help but laugh and said, "You stinking brat, you actually became shameless." Qin Feiyang scratched his head. "You guys are here too. But I don't have any good wine or dishes to entertain you here." Qin Yuan looked at Dong Xingyang and the others and said with a smile. Bai Long chuckled and said, "Homemade dishes are still delicious." Qin Yuan looked at Bai Long in surprise and said, "It's rare for these words to come out of your mouth." "She's in a good mood now," White-Eyed Wolf said. "In a good mood?" Qin Yuan was slightly stunned, turned to look at Dong Xingyang, and said with a smile, "No wonder she's in a good mood. It turns out that reunion after a long separation is better than being newly married." "You damn old man." Bai Long's cheeks turned red, and he could not help but laugh and scold. Chapter 28:13. Uncle Yuan, why aren't you surprised at all to see us back? The White-Eyed Wolf looked at Qin Yuan suspiciously. "What's there to be surprised about? I already knew about it the day you came back. I also know that you're going to meet a lot of old friends, so I didn't disturb you." Qin Yuan chuckled. "You knew about it the day you came back?" The White-Eyed Wolf was stunned. "Don't forget that I'm the guardian of this continent." Qin Yuan laughed. "Ha!" The White-Eyed Wolf laughed dryly. "Indeed. As the guardian of this continent, as long as Uncle Yuan was willing, as long as there were any signs of trouble, he would be able to know at the first moment. Don't just stand there. Sit down and talk." Qin Yuan said. Bai Long looked at the teapot on the table and said, "We're not here to drink tea with you this time." Qin Yuan was stunned. "Do you know why I'm so happy? It's because I've broken the curse." Bai Long said. "What? Broken the curse?" Qin Yuan looked at Bai Long in surprise. "Look." Bai Long shook his body and returned to his true form. Looking at Bai Long's current dragon body, Qin Yuan was stunned. "It's Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang helped me break the curse." Bai Long smiled and turned back into his human form. He continued, "And now I can still cultivate." "You can still cultivate?" Qin Yuan was stunned. He turned to look at Qin Feiyang and asked, "How did you do it?" "It's a kind of elixir." Qin Feiyang opened the jade box again and took out a disaster-crossing heavenly elixir. This is the disaster-crossing heavenly elixir. It can break all curses. Disaster-crossing heavenly elixir. Qin Yuan took the elixir and said in surprise, 3 dragon-shaped elixir auras? Did you refine this? No, it was refined by Dan Wangkai. Qin Feiyang smiled. You can even refine a pill with 3 dragon-shaped core qi. Looks like you've grown a lot over the years. Qin Yuan looked at Dan Wangkai and praised. Uncle Yuan, you flatter me. Compared to young master, I'm still a little lacking. Dan Wangkai waved his hand. Not bad. Qin Yuan looked at Qin Feiyang and Dan Wangkai and nodded with a smile. Then he looked down at the disaster-crossing heavenly pill again. Uncle Yuan, quickly take it. Qin Feiyang urged. However, Qin Yuan did not consume the disaster-crossing heavenly pill. The smile on his face slowly disappeared, and a trace of worry appeared instead. What is it? Everyone looked at him in confusion. Sigh. Qin Feiyang sighed. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Feiyang, you're a fool. Confused? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. Damn old man, what's wrong with you? He came all the way here to deliver the pills. Why are you scolding him? White Dragon frowned. I didn't scold him. I'm very happy that Feiyang thought of me at the first moment. However, have you all thought of a problem? This curse was set by small beast. Now that the curse has been broken, won't it be alarmed? Qin Yuan said. Small beast. Upon hearing Qin Yuan's words, everyone's expression changed. That's right. Why didn't they think of small beast? Qin Feiyang also slapped his head. Because he was too happy and couldn't wait, he completely neglected this point. How is it? White Dragon came back to his senses and immediately looked up at the sky. His white face was full of worry. Don't be afraid. Dong Zhengyang comforted, but he was also very nervous in his heart. White Dragon has been breaking the curse for so long, but I don't see small beast appearing. I think it might not have noticed it. Dan Wangkai looked at the sky and frowned. For a moment, everyone looked at the sky and was silent. It's useless to worry. Qin Yuan shook his head and smiled. He threw the disaster-crossing heavenly pill into his mouth and appeared extremely calm. This was the state of mind. Even if danger came, he would not panic. What happened to White Dragon happened to Qin Yuan once again. Boom. Soon. Accompanied by a low and loud sound. The curse on Qin Yuan's body was also successfully broken. Moreover, his cultivation did not drop and was still a half-step divine lord. Uncle Yuan, how do you feel? Qin Feiyang quickly asked. Qin Yuan smiled and said, I've regained my freedom. Of course I feel good. You guys are very good, but Grandpa Frog is very unhappy now. Before Qin Yuan's voice fell, a voice full of anger suddenly sounded in the sky above. This voice, the group of people's faces changed drastically. They immediately looked up and saw a small golden figure standing in the void above. If that wasn't the golden small beast, who else could it be? What should we do? The snow python suddenly panicked. Dong Zhengyang's face was also full of fear. Sigh. In the end, it still came. Qin Yuan sighed and walked in front of Qin Feiyang and the others. Uncle Yuan, what are you doing? Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Yuan's back. Qin Yuan turned a deaf ear to him. Looking at the golden small beast, he said respectfully, Lord Beast God, all of this has nothing to do with them. I asked them to do this. If you want to punish someone, punish me. Uncle Yuan. Looking at the back of the old man in front of him, Qin Feiyang's heart ached. Even in the face of the golden small beast, Uncle Yuan still walked to the front to protect him without hesitation. This selfless care was more precious than anything in the world. How could he let such an old man get hurt because of him? Swish. Qin Feiyang looked up at the small beast and said, It was all done by me. The pills were also refined by me. If you want to be angry, come at me. Feiyang, don't mess around. Qin Yuan glared at Qin Feiyang. Uncle Yuan, you used to protect me and take care of me. Now, it's my turn to protect you and take care of you. Qin Feiyang smiled. The golden small beast looked down at the two of them and sneered. How touching. A cold-blooded creature like you will never understand. Qin Feiyang sneered. Feiyang, shut up. Seeing Qin Feiyang provoking the golden small beast, Qin Yuan shouted angrily and knelt on the ground. He looked at the golden small beast and said, I'm sorry. I didn't teach it well. Please forgive me, Lord Beast God. Uncle Yuan, why are you kneeling to it? Is it worthy? Get up. Qin Feiyang shouted and grabbed Uncle Yuan's arm. Feiyang, sometimes, you have to lower your head. Qin Yuan was indifferent as he sighed. You can lower your head to anyone, but not to it. It doesn't have the right. Do you know? Not only did it snatch Changshui, but it also sealed the castle again. The worst thing is that it even sealed my battle soul. And before I came back, if it wasn't for one of my subordinates self-destructing, I would have been killed by it. Qin Feiyang's eyes were burning with anger. That's right. This piece of trash doesn't deserve to kneel to you. The white-eyed wolf roared. It sealed the castle again and sealed the battle soul? Qin Feiyang looked at the white-eyed wolf and Qin Feiyang in a daze. He never thought that Qin Feiyang and the others would have such a deep grudge with the beast god. The golden small beast looked at Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf and said, It seems that you have a prejudice against Uncle Frog. So what? I've already returned to the Great Qin, and you still won't let me go. Qin Feiyang said angrily. You're still so confident? If you hadn't broken the curse on them, would Uncle Frog have come to such a small place? The golden small beast's eyes were full of disdain. Since you don't like such a small place, then get lost. Qin Feiyang roared. You're getting more and more arrogant. The golden small beast's eyes flashed with killing intent, and a wisp of golden divine power swept out. It was obviously very slow, but Qin Feiyang found that he couldn't dodge it. Moreover, his body seemed to be frozen, and he couldn't move at all. Poof! The divine power entered Qin Feiyang's chest, and a blood puppet the size of a football appeared. It was penetrated from the front to the back, and blood was flowing out. So strong! Seeing this scene, Dong Jingyang, Dan Wangkai, Yin Wei, Wang Xiaojie, Wang Yangfeng, Bai Long, and Qin Yuan were all shocked. I've let you go time and time again. Do you really think Uncle Frog can't bear to kill you? The golden small beast looked at Qin Feiyang with disdain. Of course, it's easy for you to kill me. But I'm not convinced. We refined the disaster-crossing heavenly pill ourselves, and we didn't ask anyone for help. What right do you have to stop us? Qin Feiyang said angrily, and his face was almost distorted. You still dare to be arrogant? The golden small beast raised its eyebrows. Qin Yuan saw that the situation was not good, and he hurriedly shouted, Lord Beast God, please show mercy. Get lost. The golden small beast roared, and its voice was like thunder. It turned into an invisible sound wave, and it shook Qin Yuan until he kept vomiting blood. Uncle Yuan. Qin Feiyang's face changed drastically, and he quickly ran to Qin Yuan's side. Feiyang, give up. You'll never be a match for it. Qin Yuan sighed. No. Qin Feiyang shook his head, looked up at the golden small beast and roared. I've said it before, if you have anything, come at me, don't hurt the people around me. When you helped them break the curse, their deaths were already destined. So you can't blame me, because you're the one who caused their deaths. The golden small beast shook its head coldly, and two strands of divine power flew out, respectively towards Qin Yuan and White Dragon. Bastard! Don't go too far. The white-eyed wolf roared, and its battle soul rushed out roaring. Steal its cultivation for me. With your little strength, you want to steal Grandpa Frog's cultivation? The golden small beast's face was full of disdain, and with a swipe of its claws, the battle soul was shattered on the spot. Following closely, the two strands of divine power that flew towards Qin Yuan, and White Dragon turned in the air, and attacked the white-eyed wolf. White-eyed wolf! Qin Feiyang roared, wanting to rescue him, but no matter what, his feet couldn't move, as if he was stuck in a quagmire. Boom! The two strands of divine power blasted the white-eyed wolf's body, and its physical body was torn apart, leaving only half of its soul. White-eyed wolf! Brother wolf! Everyone roared in grief, gritting their teeth. Lord Beast God, I beg you, let them go. I'm willing to accept any punishment. Qin Yuan looked at the golden small beast and pleaded. The white dragon was so scared that it stood there trembling. Even the current Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf couldn't resist in front of the beast god, let alone them. They had just broken the curse, and they were going to die? They couldn't accept it. The golden small beast looked coldly at Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf, and then looked at Qin Yuan and White Dragon. You people are really not satisfied. I'll give you the cultivation of a half-step divine lord, and give you the power to rule 2 continents. Besides, you were the ones who chose to be guardians back then. Now you actually hate Grandpa Frog. You don't want to, right? Fine. Grandpa Frog will fulfill your wish, and at worst, Grandpa Frog will find someone else. I believe that there are plenty of people who are willing. The golden small beast waved its claws, and 2 strands of golden divine power flew towards Qin Yuan and White Dragon. At this moment, whether it was Dong Zhenyang, White Dragon, or Yan Wei and the others, they couldn't help but feel despair. Chapter 28:14. 1,000 years. Suddenly, a low and hoarse voice sounded. Everyone immediately looked at Qin Feiyang, because the one who spoke was Qin Feiyang. 1,000 years? What did that mean? Small Beast also looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang lowered his head, his face gloomy, as if he was struggling with something. Suddenly, he looked up at Small Beast and roared. Let them go, give me 1,000 years, if I can't beat you by then. You don't have to do anything, I will self-destruct in front of you. 1,000 years? Defeat me? Small Beast was stunned. That's right. The Beast God, don't tell me you don't dare to accept the challenge of an ant like me. Qin Feiyang sneered. Haha. Small Beast laughed as if it had heard the funniest joke in the world. 1,000 years. I only need 1,000 years, and I will definitely trample you under my feet. Qin Feiyang roared. Haha. Small Beast laughed even more wildly, and tears seemed to be coming out of its eyes. You don't dare? Qin Feiyang roared. All right. Small Beast stopped laughing, and the 2 strands of divine power that were heading towards Qin Feiyang and White Dragon also stopped in the void. It then looked down at Qin Feiyang and said, Don't say 1,000 years, Daddy Frog will give you 10,000 years. It's a deal. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. The longer the time, the better. But listen to Daddy Frog. If you still can't defeat Daddy Frog after 10,000 years, then not only will you die, but the entire Great Qin and Forgotten Continent will be buried with you. And the Black Tortoise Realm. In short, everything related to you will be destroyed by then. Do you dare to make such a bet? Small Beast smiled coldly. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang's eyes suddenly trembled. This was no longer a gamble with his personal wealth, but with the fate of billions of living beings. What is it? Wasn't he quite awesome just now? How did he scare you? Small Beast's face was filled with disdain. Qin Feiyang said angrily, This is obviously our personal grudge. Why do you have to involve these innocent people? This is the price. If you can afford to play, then play. If you can't afford to play, then behave yourself. Hurry up and decide. Otherwise, Qin Yuan and the others will all die. The golden small beast said indifferently. Qin Feiyang turned to look at Uncle Yuan. Qin Yuan cried out, Feiyang, don't gamble with the lives of 3 continents for me. But if I can't even save you, how can I save the living beings of the 3 continents? Qin Feiyang murmured. He looked up at the small beast and roared. I'll bet with you, but I have a condition. Awesome. The small beast laughed heartily. Sigh. Qin Yuan let out a low sigh. In order to save him, was it worth it to gamble the fate of 3 continents? The White Dragon also looked at Qin Feiyang with a complicated expression. Although it was to save Qin Yuan, it was also to save her. 3 continents, billions of living beings. This bet could be said to be universally shocking. In the entire world, perhaps only Qin Feiyang dared to agree. The Golden Lady looked at Qin Feiyang and said, State your condition. Qin Feiyang said, Let Uncle Yuan and the White Dragon continue to be the guardians of Great Qin and the Forgotten Continent. What? Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Why did the small beast come? Wasn't it because they broke the curse? For all of this, they even gambled the fate of 3 continents. But now why did Qin Feiyang want them to continue being the guardians? If he did this, wouldn't everything he did before be in vain? The small beast was also quite surprised. Obviously, it didn't expect Qin Feiyang to raise such a condition. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Qin Feiyang comforted. He looked up at the small beast and continued, but it's different this time. They should enjoy the rights of a guardian. Didn't Lord Frog already give them the cultivation of a half-step divine lord and the authority to rule 2 continents? The small beast frowned. This is considered the rights of a guardian? A true guardian should be like the fire python, controlling the power of the natural order, and can't put curses on them. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. You know quite a lot. But aren't you afraid that if you really give them the authority to control the power of the natural order, their ambitions will grow and they will bring disaster to the 2 continents? The small beast looked at him playfully. You don't have to worry about this. Since they are guardians, they should enjoy these rights. Otherwise, who would be willing? Even if someone is willing at the beginning, after a long time, they will still resent you. Today's matter will happen again. Is this what you want to see? Of course. With your strength, killing them is as easy as flipping your hand, but I believe that you don't like this kind of trouble, Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. The small beast was silent. Uncle Yuan Bai Long and the fire python, although they are in different places, they are all guardians. They should enjoy the same treatment. This is my only condition. I believe that for you it is just a small matter, Qin Feiyang said. Haha, the small beast laughed and nodded. Okay, Lord Frog will do as you say and give them the rights. After saying that, it waved its claws, and 2 rays of divine light entered Qin Yuan and Bai Long's forehead. But you have to remember that you only have 10,000 years, so work hard. In addition, I will give you 3 more days. If you are still here after 3 days, I will kill you without mercy. The small beast smiled coldly. Qin Feiyang was stunned for a moment, then suddenly became angry and roared. Why? This is my home, and I don't even have the freedom to go home? Freedom. When you defeat Lord Frog, no one will care where you go. But now, humph. Lord Frog has the final say. The small beast's eyes flashed coldly, and it disappeared without a trace. Only then did everyone breathe a sigh of relief. Qin Feiyang looked gloomily at the place where the small beast disappeared, then quickly ran to the white-eyed wolf's divine soul and asked, Are you okay? Why don't you try? I almost lost my life. How can I be okay? The white-eyed wolf's angry voice came from the half of the divine soul. Qin Feiyang smiled and sent the white-eyed wolf to the castle. It would not take long for the white-eyed wolf to condense a divine soul and reconstruct its body. Feiyang, you are too stupid. How can you defeat it in 10,000 years? Qin Yuan sighed helplessly. Qin Feiyang was silent for a while, then turned to Qin Yuan and said with a smile, Uncle Yuan, don't worry. I can do it. Don't be so confident. Even if you have the time array of 1 day and 1,000 years, it will be difficult to defeat it, because we don't know how strong it is. Dong Zhengyang shook his head. A time array of 1 day and 1,000 years. Yan Wei, Wang Xiaojia, and Wang Yangfeng were stunned when they heard this. Qin Yuan was also shocked. A time array of 1 day and 1,000 years was the legendary time array. No wonder Qin Feiyang dared to accept it. At the beginning, he even said that he could defeat the small beast in 1,000 years. Difficult, Qin Feiyang murmured and smiled faintly. Even if it is difficult, we have to go on. Thank you. Bai Long looked at Qin Feiyang with a face full of gratitude. No need. Even without today's incident, I will have a battle with it sooner or later. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, then looked at the worried Qin Yuan and smiled bitterly. Uncle Yuan, can you have some confidence in me? When have I ever disappointed you? Let's talk about it later. Don't we still have 10,000 years? Think about it, a mortal's life is only a few decades. We still have 10,000 years to live. Even if I lose to it, it will be considered a gain. Qin Feiyang added a few more words. You brat. Qin Yuan shook his head and smiled. Uncle Yuan believes in you. You can definitely do it. Thank you. Qin Feiyang smiled gratefully and said, Take a look and see if you can control the rule force. Qin Yuan looked at the sky, raised his old arm, and waved gently. Boom. A rule force suddenly descended from the sky. It can really be controlled? Yan Wei and the others were stunned. If they could control the rule force, then Qin Yuan and the White Dragon would be the true guardians in the future. Qin Feiyang smiled and turned to the White Dragon. This harvest is not easy to come by. I hope you can make good use of it and visit the Forgotten Continent. Don't worry. I don't have any resentment now. Let's talk about it later. This is also what you fought for me. I will use the rule force to protect the Forgotten Continent. The White Dragon nodded solemnly. All right then. There are only 3 days left. Go back and spend time with Mother. Qin Feiyang sighed. Originally, he wanted to come back and stay for a few hundred years until the hell of the Nether King ended. Unexpectedly, there were only 3 days left in the blink of an eye. Yes, I should go and spend time with her. After all, I don't know how many years I will have to wait before I can come back. Qin Yuan nodded. Then follow me to the imperial capital. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Yuan, his eyes full of expectation. He also wanted to have a good talk with Uncle Yuan. All right. Qin Yuan nodded and smiled. Qin Feiyang turned to look at Dong Xingyang and asked, now that the White Dragon's curse has been broken, do you still want to go to the ancient world? What do you think? Dong Xingyang smiled faintly. Up to you. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at Wang Xiaojia asking, how is your sister now? She has recovered a lot. Wang Xiaojia nodded. All right then, go to the Black Tortoise world now. Remember, you only have 3 days. How much you can gain in these 3 days will depend on your luck. Qin Feiyang said. This disciple will work hard. Wang Xiaojia nodded. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice to Dan Wangkai. Later, tell Fire Lotus not to let Wang Xiaojia meet Qin Qin. Why? Dan Wangkai was suspicious. If Xiaojia knows that I am bringing Qin Qin to the ancient world, what will he do? He will definitely pester me as well. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Then bring him along. Dan Wangkai thought. No. He still has his mother and sister to take care of. I won't let him die outside. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. All right. Dan Wangkai secretly agreed. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent Wang Xiaojia and Dan Wangkai to the castle. Then, Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Yuanshan and Yan Wei and laughed. I haven't had a good gathering with you guys since I came back. Let's go to the imperial capital together. All right. The two of them nodded. But when we return to the imperial capital, don't mention what happened here to anyone, especially Mother. Qin Feiyang reminded everyone. You don't need to tell us that. We know that. Everyone nodded. Because this was Qin Feiyang's personality. If there was anything, he would shoulder it himself, and he didn't want everyone to worry together with him. Then let's go. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. Bai Long looked at Qin Feiyang and said, I will return to Forgotten Continent first. I will come to send you off the day after tomorrow. Dong Zhengyang also looked at Qin Feiyang and laughed. I will also go to Forgotten Continent and accompany her. Up to you. Qin Feiyang laughed, and then looked at Qin Yuan. Qin Yuan waved his hand, sweeping up Qin Feiyang and the others, and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 28:15. Do you really want to go again? After Qin Feiyang and the rest left, Bai Long turned to look at Dong Xingyang and asked. Of course. Dong Xingyang nodded. Why? Bai Long frowned. In the end, Qin Feiyang made this gamble of fate with the little beast in order to help you and Qin Yuan. How can I sit back and do nothing when it's related to you? We'll talk about it later. Small beast must also be dealt with. Otherwise, it will find me sooner or later. Dong Xingyang said in a low voice. Bai Long asked, because of the Eye of Destiny? Yes. Dong Xingyang nodded, pondered for a while, and then sighed. I'll be frank with you. People like us who have awakened the heaven-defying fighting soul are born with a mission. Even if you hide from the world, someone will come to you sooner or later. What exactly is the mission? Bai Long frowned. Dong Zhengyang looked up at the sky and muttered, the battle of destiny, the redemption of death. The battle of destiny, the redemption of death. Bai Long muttered. The white dragon murmured, completely unable to understand. The large palace. Lu Qiuyu was very happy these days. She seemed to be a few years younger. Autumn Rain Restaurant. At this moment, Lu Qiuyu was sitting in the pavilion with two maids. She was making exquisite pastries. One of the maids smiled and said, "Your Highness, you've been making pastries every day. How can His Highness finish them? Anyway, Feiyang will be here for a long time. Take your time." Lu Qiuyu smiled. "His Highness is so lucky to have you as his mother." The two maids were envious. "You're wrong. I'm so lucky to have this son." Lu Qiuyu smiled. "You have such a good relationship with your son. But His Highness has been away for a few days. Why hasn't he returned?" The two maids frowned. Lu Qiuyu said, "He has many friends. He will definitely be away for a few days." One of the maids said unhappily, "How can his friends be more important than his mother?" "What are you saying? How can this be compared?" Lu Qiuyu was unhappy. "I'm sorry, Your Highness." The maid hurriedly apologized. "At home, I rely on my parents. Outside, I rely on my friends. So whether it's family or friends, they are all equally important. The two of you are too young and haven't experienced much." Lu Qiuyu looked at the two maids and shook her head. Yes. The two of them giggled, as if they were not very afraid of this empress. Of course, this was related to Lu Qiuyu's personality. Even though she was the mother of a nation, she did not put on any airs, and appeared to be extremely amiable. Therefore, the maidservant by her side was not very afraid, but there was definitely reverence. After all, Lu Qiuyu was already very strong. "Mother," suddenly, a laugh came from outside the garden. Lu Qiuyu looked up, and saw a group of people standing at the entrance. They were Qin Feiyang, Qin Yuan, Yin Wei, and Wang Yangfeng. Lu Qiuyu saw that Qin Yuan, Yin Wei, and Wang Yangfeng were also present. She quickly put down the pastries in her hands, and stood up to welcome them. "Greetings, Your Highness." Yin Wei and Wang Yangfeng bowed. "No need to be so polite, no need to be so polite." Lu Qiuyu hurriedly waved her hand and said with a smile, "I really didn't expect you guys to come." Yin Wei said, "I just hope that Your Highness won't blame us for disturbing you." No. I'm only happy that everyone is here." Lu Qiuyu smiled slightly, then looked at Qin Yuan and shook her head. "You are even more difficult to invite than them. All these years, I sent someone to invite you every time during the holidays, but you never came." Qin Yuan shook his head and said with a smile, "I've long been used to this kind of life. It's too lively and I'm not used to it." Lu Qiuyu said, "Then it seems that Feiyang has the face to invite you over immediately." Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Yuan and said, "Uncle Yuan, we are all family. If you are invited to come during the holidays, just come. There's no need to be polite." Qin Yuan smiled bitterly and said, "Don't listen to your mother. I'm not polite. I've also come many times. I remember every time you came. In the past few hundred years, there have only been 10 times. Lu Qiuyu was dissatisfied. All right. I will definitely come often in the future." Qin Yuan shook his head and smiled. "That's more like it. Go inside and sit. You two go and tidy up." Lu Qiuyu looked at the two maids behind her and said, "Yes." The two maids nodded and turned to run into the pavilion. Qin Feiyang and the others followed Lu Qiuyu and walked slowly along the path to the pavilion. Wang Yangfeng looked around and said with a smile, "Outsiders will probably never think that our great Qin's Empress Dowager would actually live in such a simple place. It's good to be simple. It's steady and calm." Lu Qiuyu smiled. After entering the pavilion, everyone sat in front of the tea table and started chatting. "Feiyang, how are your brothers and sisters?" Lu Qiuyu suddenly asked. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, "I went to see them this morning. They are all fine. Now they are staying in the Black Tortoise world and don't want to come out." "These insensible children." Lu Qiuyu shook her head. "They are no longer children," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "What do you mean?" Lu Qiuyu was stunned. "You will know in 2 days. Let's keep you in suspense for now." Qin Feiyang chuckled. "You little brat. Lu Chuyu shook her head and said, "Why? Have you seen them?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Are you relieved now?" Lu Chuyu said with a smile. "Yes. Seeing that they are living well, I can also roam the outside world with peace of mind." Qin Feiyang said. Lu Chuyu looked outside and asked suspiciously, "Why don't I see the wolf pup?" "It is about to break through, so it went to the black tortoise world to cultivate in seclusion," Qin Feiyang said. "Is that so? I thought it was fooling around somewhere." Lu Chuyu shook her head. "Mother, you have misunderstood it. Ever since it entered the ancient world, it has been in seclusion. It is more serious and hardworking than anyone," Qin Feiyang said. "Is that so?" Lu Chuyu was surprised. "All these years, without its mischievous behavior, I am still not used to it," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "For it to cultivate in seclusion all day with its personality, it is really rare." Lu Chuyu shook her head and smiled. "Yes. However, hard work also pays off. Its strength should be stronger than mine now," Qin Feiyang said. "The stronger you become, the prouder mother will be of you. However, you can't just think about cultivation. You also have to cultivate your relationship with the mermaid princess. Women generally don't ask for much. A little care and care is enough," Lu Chuyu said. "I know." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Alright then, you guys chat first. I will go to the back and cook some dishes for you guys, so that you can drink a few cups at noon." Lu Chuyu stood up and smiled. "Then I will trouble mother." Qin Feiyang chuckled. Lu Chuyu smiled, turned around, and left with the two maids. After watching Lu Chuyu leave, Qin Yuan turned to Qin Feiyang and asked, "You can't bear to leave, right?" Qin Feiyang's face was full of melancholy. Only 3 days left. He wasn't ready to leave at all. "Take it easy. Even if there was no small beast, you would have to leave sooner or later." Qin Yuan patted Qin Feiyang's shoulder. Sigh. Qin Feiyang sighed. He could only comfort himself like this. For the next 2 days, Qin Feiyang accompanied his mother without leaving her side. Lu Chuyu was also happier day by day. As for Yin Wei, Wang Yangfeng, and Qin Yuan, when they were free, they would go to the back mountain of the Emperor Palace to drink tea, chat, and play chess with Emperor Hong, Emperor Chun, Old Qin, and the others. However, happy times always pass quickly. The third day, early morning. Qin Feiyang got up early in the morning. After washing up, he stood on the balcony of the second floor and looked up at the slowly rising sun. This was already the last day. He would leave tomorrow morning. Even if he was reluctant, he couldn't change it. This was strength. Today, in front of Small Beast, he didn't even have the right to stay at home for one more day. Crack! Unconsciously, he clenched his fists, and his joints made crisp cracking sounds. If he wanted true freedom, not only did he have to defeat Small Beast and Ice Dragon, but he also had to transcend this world. In other words, he had to defeat the god of creation. The road ahead was long. "You're up so early? What are you looking at? So engrossed?" Lu Chuyu stood beside Qin Feiyang without him noticing. Qin Feiyang quickly collected his thoughts, loosened his clenched fists, turned to look at Lu Chuyu, and said with a smile, "Maybe I drank too much last night. My head hurts, so I can't sleep." Last night, he, Yin Wei, Wang Yangfeng, Uncle Yuan, Monarch Chun, Monarch Hong, Monarch Qin, Old Qin, and the others drank and chatted until midnight. He did drink a lot. "Don't drink too much. Your father too. He knows you can't hold your liquor, but he keeps drinking with you. I'll go and scold him later," Lu Chuyu said. No. Father is also happy. Besides, I can't drink with them much," Qin Feiyang said with a smile, but the last sentence was said in his heart. Yes. He was leaving tomorrow morning. How many more times could he drink? "Okay, I'll go and make breakfast first." Lu Chuyu smiled and turned to go downstairs. Qin Feiyang looked at his mother's back and couldn't help but feel sad. His mother was so happy now, but if she knew that he was leaving tomorrow, how disappointed would she be? He couldn't bear it, and didn't want to ruin his mother's happy mood. "Don't talk about it if you don't want to. Spend the day happily." Qin Yuan walked to Qin Feiyang's side and said with a smile. Qin Feiyang looked at Uncle Yuan and nodded with a smile. Then let's go down and have some morning tea? I like the heavenly immortal you brought back very much. Qin Yuan said with a smile. If you like it, I'll give you a few £100 later, Qin Feiyang said. A few £100? Qin Yuan was stunned. What's a few £100? I can take out a few £1,000. Qin Feiyang smiled proudly. This was not a joke. Although this kind of tea grew too slowly and the leaf tips were the most tender, but after so many years, the fire lotus had accumulated a lot. After all, this 1 day and 1,000 years time array was not a joke. Chapter 28:16. Qin Feiyang and Qin Yuan sat in the pavilion. Just as they finished brewing tea, Yan Wei and Wang Yangfeng walked out. Like Qin Feiyang, the three of them had been staying in the Autumn Rain Inn for the past few days. There were many rooms in the Autumn Rain Inn and a dozen more could stay there. However, it wasn't easy to stay in the Autumn Rain Inn. After all, this was the residence of the emperor and his wife. Morning. Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them and smiled. The two of them smiled and walked into the pavilion to drink tea together. I really envy you guys. Soon, the emperor also walked out in his dragon robe. Looking at Qin Feiyang and the other three, he shook his head and said, Others are also envious of you. Yan Wei smiled. Forget it. When can I be like you guys, sitting here early in the morning and drinking tea freely? That will be enough. Let's not talk about it anymore. I'll go to the morning assembly first. I'll come back to accompany you guys later. After saying that, the emperor quickly left. See, the emperor who seems to be endlessly glorious to others also has troubles. Qin Yuan shook his head. There's nothing we can do about it. Many people only see the surface. Only when he reaches this step and sits on this position can he understand the helplessness and troubles. Yan Wei said. Isn't life like this? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, took out a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone, and placed them neatly on the stone table. What are you doing? Qin Yuan and the other two looked at him suspiciously. Before leaving, I have to leave something behind. Qin Feiyang smiled. The three of them looked at each other. Yan Wei stood up and sat beside Qin Feiyang, helping to grind the ink. Qin Feiyang picked up the brush, dipped it in the ink, pondered for a while, and lowered his head to copy. Qin Yuan and the other two looked at it for a while. It turned out to be a kind of pill formula. Chaos Divine Pill, Nirvana Divine Pill, etc. After a while, Qin Feiyang finally finished copying. Feiyang, your intentions are good, but have you considered that Great Qin and the Forgotten Continent don't have such medicinal ingredients? Qin Yuan said. Even if we have the herbs, we don't have a high level of alchemy fire and alchemy furnace. We won't be able to refine it. Wang Yangfeng added. I've thought about this for a long time. Later, I will give you some alchemy fire, alchemy furnace, and medicinal herbs. After I leave, I will give them to my mother. Qin Feiyang smiled. Yan Wei said, but we don't have an alchemist of that level. Take it slow. Who didn't climb up step by step? Maybe in the future, a powerful alchemist will be born by our side? Qin Feiyang smiled. All right. The three of them looked at each other and nodded. Uncle Yuan, please keep this pill formula for now. Qin Feiyang folded the pill recipe and handed it to Qin Yuan. Qin Yuan took it in his hand, looked at Qin Feiyang, and sighed inwardly. For Great Qin, this child had already done too much. Emperor Hong and Emperor Chen often said that Qin Feiyang was Great Qin's fortune, and he deserved it. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, raised his head and looked at the pavilion. Seeing that his mother didn't appear, he lowered his head and continued to write. This wasn't a pill formula, but a letter. A farewell letter to his mother, father, and all his friends and family. Yes, he wanted to use this method to bid farewell, because he really didn't want to see everyone's sad and tearful expressions when they saw him off. Although everyone would be sad when they saw the letter, at least he wouldn't see it with his own eyes. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, his heart would feel better. A moment later, Qin Feiyang wrote an entire page, then dried the ink, folded it, and handed it to Qin Yuan. Then, Qin Feiyang put away the brush, ink, paper and inkstone, took a sip of tea, and then looked at Qin Yuan and the other two, who all looked at him with a disappointed face, and couldn't help but shake his head and smile. What are you guys doing? Didn't I just say that we have to spend the day happily? Besides, if mother sees your expressions, she will definitely be suspicious. Qin Feiyang said. Qin Yuan said helplessly, You still have the mood to comfort us? What a joke. I am someone who has seen the world. My state of mind is definitely better than yours. Qin Feiyang smiled proudly. Qin Yuan and the other two looked at each other and laughed. What are you laughing at? So happy. At this moment, Lu Qiuyu walked out and looked at them and asked with a smile. Nothing, we just talked about some funny topics. Qin Feiyang shook his head. All right then, come in and finish eating, Lu Qiuyu said. After breakfast, Qin Feiyang helped to tidy up the bowls and chopsticks, looked at Lu Qiuyu and said, Mother, I will go out for a walk with Uncle Yuan. Okay. Lu Qiuyu nodded. Qin Feiyang then looked at Yan Wei and Wang Yangfeng, and said, You guys also have to work hard, make a trip to the Lu family Forgotten Continent spirit state, and call everyone who needs to be called. Then when they ask, What should we say? The two asked secretly. Just say that it's more lively with more people. Everyone has a good gathering. Qin Feiyang said. Okay. The two nodded and got up to leave. Uncle Yuan, let's go too. Qin Feiyang smiled at Qin Yuan, and flew towards the back of the mountain. Greetings, Your Highness. At the entrance of the back of the mountain, the Kirin army guarding outside immediately bowed. Qin Feiyang nodded and followed Qin Yuan straight into the back of the mountain. At this time, the back of the mountain was surrounded by clouds and mist, like a fairyland. With the 10 crystal veins and spirit veins, this place had become a holy land for cultivation. Qin Yuan said with a smile. This time you came back, you have made a great contribution again. Contribution? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Crystal veins, spirit veins, divine weapons, divine arts, aren't they all contributions? Qin Yuan said. These are all small matters. Qin Feiyang shook his head. It's a small matter for you, but for us, these divine objects are unimaginable. Qin Yuan smiled. Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. Then I'll take you to the Black Tortoise world? Okay. Qin Yuan nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the two immediately appeared in the sky above the ancient castle of the Black Tortoise world. Looking at the medicine field below and the astonishing energy of the spirit veins and crystal veins, even Qin Yuan's indifferent mood couldn't help but be shocked. Although I've given out a lot of crystal veins and spirit veins, for me, it's just a drop in the ocean. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. I've seen it. Qin Yuan nodded. Qin Dage. At this time, Fire Lotus flew up. Qin Feiyang looked at Fire Lotus and said with a smile, Fire Lotus, let me introduce you. This old man is the Uncle Yuan that I often mention to you. Hello, Uncle Yuan. Fire Lotus bowed. Don't. Qin Yuan hurriedly waved his hand, because in his eyes, Fire Lotus was like an unfathomable ocean. Obviously, this was an extremely terrifying expert. Uncle Yuan, she's called Fire Lotus, a sister of mine. The heavenly immortal dew was cultivated and brewed by her alone. Qin Feiyang laughed. Qin Yuan nodded his head and looked at Fire Lotus with a smile. So the heavenly immortal dew was made by you. I had nothing to do, so I planted it for fun. I just didn't expect that Qin Dage would like it so much. Fire Lotus laughed. Planted for fun? Qin Yuan was slightly taken aback and revealed a meaningful smile. How could this kind of tea be planted for fun? It must have been carefully cultivated. It was just that there were some things that even if one saw through, one shouldn't say it out loud. Fire Lotus, go prepare some tea leaves as well as pill fire, pill furnace, and various medicinal herbs. Don't hurt the roots of these medicinal herbs. Qin Feiyang looked at Fire Lotus and said, Understood. Fire Lotus nodded and then looked at Qin Yuan with a smile. Then Uncle Yuan, I'll go get busy first. You can do whatever you want. All right. Qin Yuan nodded. After Fire Lotus left, Qin Yuan looked at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, You're good. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang scratched his head. Qin Yuan said, such a good girl is actually hiding in the black tortoise world. Tell me honestly, when do you plan to get married? Get married? Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback and smiled bitterly. Uncle Yuan, when did your image become so vivid? Still pretending? Qin Yuan was unhappy. I'm not pretending. The relationship between Huo Lian and I is purely that of siblings. Qin Feiyang was helpless. Is that so? Qin Yuan frowned. Yes. Whether it's me or her, we don't have any other thoughts. Qin Feiyang nodded. That's a pity. Although I just met her, this old man really likes her. Qin Yuan shook his head regretfully and asked, then what's her cultivation like? Her cultivation? Qin Feiyang was stunned and shook his head. It's better if you don't know. Brat, this old man has seen all kinds of things. How can you scare this old man? Qin Yuan glared at Qin Feiyang. All right. Fire Lotus is at the initial imperishable stage and has comprehended the law of time. She's a true supreme expert. Even in the ancient world, she's a top existence. Anyway, she's much stronger than me. Qin Feiyang smiled. Since she's so much stronger than you, why would she be willing to be your sister? Qin Yuan was doubtful. Is there a need to think about it? Of course it's because of my character and charm. Qin Feiyang smiled. Brat! Qin Yuan scolded with a smile. But then again, how strong was the imperishable stage? Qin Feiyang seemed to see through Uncle Yuan's doubts and explained. The imperishable stage is very strong. Above the divine monarch stage is the paragon stage. Above the paragon stage is the nine heavens stage. And above the nine heavens stage is the imperishable stage. As Qin Feiyang explained, he took Qin Yuan to see the scenery of the black tortoise world. Looking at the vast world, Qin Yuan was extremely shocked. An independent world. He never thought that in just a few hundred years, this brat had already grown to this extent. Several days passed. The two returned to the Devil's Land, and Fire Lotus had already prepared everything and stored it in a Qiankuan ring. Several days passed in the Black Tortoise world, but it was only a moment outside. Qin Yuan carefully put away the Qiankuan ring, then looked at the ancient castle below, and then glanced at the Devil's Land and said, this old man sensed many familiar auras. Everyone should be back. Qin Feiyang nodded. All right. Let's go out. Qin Yuan smiled. Everyone was hiding in the Black Tortoise world, and he understood that, so he didn't disturb them. Fire Lotus smiled and said, Uncle Yuan, take care. Qin Yuan said, in the future, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Feiyang. I'm not afraid of being laughed at, but it has always been Qin Dage taking care of me. Fire Lotus said, he can take care of you? It's good enough that he doesn't cause you trouble. Qin Yuan shook his head. Uncle Yuan, am I so unbearable? Qin Feiyang was speechless. Qin Yuan shook his head and smiled, then glanced at the continent in front of him and said, let's go. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the two appeared in the sky above the back mountain again, then walked toward the deepest part of the mountain, where Emperor Hong and Emperor Chen lived. Chapter 28:17. Entering the deepest part of the back mountain, Qin Feiyang saw Emperor Hong and Emperor Chen sitting by the lake, drinking morning tea. Grandpa, great-grandpa. Qin Feiyang waved and smiled. Morning. Emperor Hong and Emperor Chen raised their heads, smiling at Qin Feiyang and Emperor Chen. The two walked over and sat on the side. Drink. Emperor Chen poured 2 cups of tea and pushed them in front of Qin Feiyang and Qin Yuan. Qin Feiyang smiled, took a sip of tea, and then looked at the statues in the center of the lake. What are you looking at? Emperor Chen asked suspiciously. Maybe. What else can I leave behind? Qin Feiyang murmured. Several rays of divine light flashed from the center of his eyebrows and disappeared into the statue's forehead. These were all formed by divine arts. There were divine armor, soul destruction technique, Qilin art, wisdom king golden body, and so on. The inheritance had been left behind. Whether the future generations could get it or not depended on their luck. What are you doing? Emperor Hong and Emperor Chen looked at each other, and then at Qin Feiyang, puzzled. Leave more inheritance. I hope our Qin clan can get better and better in the future. Qin Feiyang smiled. Thank you. Emperor Hong smiled with relief. What I can do is to the best of my ability. Qin Feiyang shook his head. That's enough. Emperor Hong nodded. Emperor Qin asked, Feiyang, since you're making arrangements so early, has the departure time been decided? Qin Feiyang and Qin Yuan looked at each other. Qin Feiyang said, to be honest, the time has been decided. When? Emperor Qin asked. Tomorrow morning. Qin Feiyang said. So soon? Emperor Hong and Emperor Qin froze. Yes. Something happened, so I had to leave. Qin Feiyang nodded. Emperor Hong came to a realization and said, no wonder you've been staying in the Imperial Palace these past 2 days. You've only been back for a few days. What's the hurry? Emperor Qin frowned. There are some things that I can't decide. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Emperor Qin and Emperor Hong looked at each other and saw Qin Feiyang's helplessness, so they didn't ask anymore. All right. Wander in peace outside. We'll take care of everything at home. Emperor Hong laughed. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. He looked at the two of them and said, don't tell mother about this for now, lest she be sad. Understood. The two of them nodded. Qin Yuan smiled and said, then let's go to the Autumn Rain Inn. Everyone should be here soon. Everyone? Emperor Hong and Emperor Chen were stunned. We're about to leave, so Feiyang invited all our friends to gather at the Imperial Palace. Qin Yuan said. Then the Imperial Palace is going to be lively today. The two looked at each other and smiled. On the way back to the Autumn Rain Inn, the four of them also called Li Jian, Old Qin, and the others. Qin Feiyang didn't hide anything from them. They didn't say much and went to the Autumn Rain Inn with smiles. Arriving at the Autumn Rain Inn, Qin Feiyang saw 7 people sitting in the pavilion drinking tea and chatting. It was Lu Zheng, Lu Hong, Uncle He, and the 4 grandpas. Qin Yuan smiled and said, this Yin Wei and Lu Xingyang are really efficient. Qin Feiyang smiled and walked toward the pavilion. You old geezers. Why do you have time to come to our Imperial Palace? The Flood Emperor pretended to be surprised. What? Do we have to get your permission? The 4th grandpa said with a cold face. Of course not. What I mean is, if you're coming, let me know in advance so that I can welcome you. Emperor Hong hurriedly waved his hand. How dare we trouble you? Lu Yin said. Ha ha. The old geezers looked at each other and couldn't help laughing. Greetings, Emperor Hong. Greetings, Emperor Chen. Greetings, Uncle Yuan. Lu Hong got up and saluted. Didn't I tell you to call me Grandpa and Great-Grandpa in the future? Why is it still Emperor Hong? Emperor Chen? So distant. Emperor Chen was dissatisfied. Lu Hong smiled and said, Grandpa, Great-Grandpa. That's right. You young people talk. After saying that, Emperor Chen sat at the stone table and chatted with the 4 grandpas. The old geezers got together to drink tea and chat, laughing constantly. Lu Zheng and Lu Hong pulled Qin Feiyang to the side. What? Qin Feiyang looked at the two suspiciously. Lu Zheng frowned and said, why did you suddenly call us to the Imperial Palace? Qin Feiyang was speechless. What else? Of course, it's a family gathering. Is there really nothing else? Lu Zheng and Lu Hong looked at him suspiciously. No. Qin Feiyang shook his head. At this time, Lu Chuyu stood at the door of the attic, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Feiyang, come here. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded, looked at Lu Zheng and Lu Hong, and whispered, there will be more people coming later. Help me welcome them. After saying that, he ran to the attic. More people are coming? Lu Hong and Lu Chuyu were stunned. Qin Feiyang ran to the door of the attic, looked at Lu Chuyu, and asked with a smile, Mother, what's the matter? I just heard from your grandpa that it was you who asked them to come to the Imperial Palace. What's going on? Lu Chuyu was suspicious. What else can it be? I just want everyone to get together and be happy. Qin Feiyang laughed. He had expected his mother to ask. Is there really nothing else? Lu Chuyu looked at him doubtfully. There's really nothing else. Qin Feiyang was helpless. Lu Chuyu said, don't lie to me. Even if you lend me dozens of guts, I won't dare to lie to you. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. All right. Then how do you plan to arrange so many people? Lu Chuyu asked. What's there to arrange? They're not outsiders. Let's get together, drink tea, and chat. That's enough. Qin Feiyang said. How can you entertain guests casually like this? Lu Chuyu was speechless and said, Okay, I'll arrange it. You go and chat with them. Then I'll have to trouble you, mother. Qin Feiyang smiled. Brat. Lu Chuyu scolded with a smile. It's so lively. Suddenly, a hoarse laugh sounded. Everyone looked up and saw a group of people landing at the entrance of the garden. Old Master Run? Uncle Yan. Ling Yunfei? Sister Wu Shuang. Shuang. Lu Hong was stunned. Why are they all here? Ling Yunfei looked at the indifferent group of people and said in dissatisfaction. Hey, is there no one to receive us? We're guests after all. Scram. What kind of guest are you? If you want to come, then come. If you don't want to come, then leave. Lu Hong glared at Ling Yunfei, walked up and smiled. Grandpa Ren, Uncle Yan, Uncle Jiang, Aunt Shui, Aunt Lu Ji, please come in. A group of people filed in. Lu Hong looked at Ling Yunfei's daughter and immediately squatted on the ground, smiling. Yenner is already so big. You are? The little girl looked at Lu Hong suspiciously. Don't you remember? I even went to see you when you were young. Lu Hong laughed. The little girl shook her head. Yenner, this woman is a tigress. You'd better stay away from her in the future. Ling Yunfei held the little girl and taught her seriously. Who are you calling a tigress? Lu Hong immediately frowned. Whether she's a tigress or not, Lu Zheng has the most right to say. Ling Yunfei chuckled, looked at Lu Zheng standing not far away and said, Lu Zheng, say something fair. You and I know it in our hearts. Why do you have to say it out loud? Lu Zheng winked. What did you say? Lu Hong immediately glared at him. No, my dear wife, this Ling Yunfei is a scum. You should stay away from him in the future. Lu Zheng quickly waved his hand and glared at Ling Yunfei fiercely. With the opposite sex, there's no humanity. Ling Yunfei shook his head sadly. The little girl looked at Ling Yunfei and said, Daddy, what do you mean by with the opposite sex, there's no humanity? This. The little girl suddenly asked this, and Ling Yunfei didn't know how to answer for a moment. See, sooner or later, the child will be led astray by you. Zhao Shuang couldn't help but glare at Ling Yunfei. Ha! Ling Yunfei smiled embarrassedly. In the pavilion, Emperor Hong stood up and looked at Old Master Run and the others. He said with a smile. Come, sit. I'm afraid we can't sit here. Jiang Jingyi said with a smile. Yen Nanshan also chuckled. It feels more lively than the end of the year. Yeah. Everyone nodded. Lu Zheng, what are you still doing? Hurry up and bring some stools over. Lu Yan looked at Lu Zheng and shouted. Lu Zheng muttered. It seems that I'm also a guest. Lu Yan immediately stared. Okay, right away. Lu Zheng nodded and hurriedly ran into the attic. Looking at Qin Feiyang, he said angrily, You have the nerve to let me, a guest, busy myself? You're the only one who thinks of yourself as a guest. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. Scram! Lu Zheng glared fiercely at Qin Feiyang, then picked up a few stools and ran out. Lu Zhengyang looked outside and asked, Feiyang, is there anyone else? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. You child, calling so many people at once. I wasn't prepared at all. Lu Chuyu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Didn't I already say that we're all family? There's nothing to prepare. Qin Feiyang said. Lu Chuyu smiled helplessly. Yo. So many people. Is it some kind of happy occasion? Suddenly, another voice rang out. Fatso, Li Yan, Gong Sunbei Yishu, and the others also came under the lead of Yan Wei and Wang Yangfeng. Lu Hong was stunned. Almost everyone was here. Fatso ran in, looked at everyone, cleared his throat and shouted. Grandpas and grandpas, uncles and aunties, brothers and sisters, hello. Everyone looked at Fatso speechlessly. How old was he? Why was he still so childish? Why is there no reaction? Give me a red packet at least. Fatso said sadly. Everyone rolled their eyes at once. Li Yan's face darkened and she said, "Don't embarrass me here, okay? How is this embarrassing? This is called bonding. You don't understand." Fatso waved his hand and ran to the attic. "Li Yan, this damn Fatso, we still have to teach him a lesson." Fengling Er looked at Li Yan and said, "Indeed. You're already a father, but you're still so indecent." Lu Hong, Zhao Shuanger, Ren Wushuang, and Luo Qingzhu also nodded one after another. Fatso ran to Qin Feiyang's side and looked at Lu Qiuyu with a smile. "Hello, Auntie." Lu Qiuyu smiled slightly. "Auntie, I have something to talk to boss." After Fatso finished speaking, he dragged Qin Feiyang and ran to the side. "What?" Qin Feiyang looked at him in confusion. Fatso whispered, "Boss, what's wrong with you? Didn't we just have a gathering a few days ago? Is this not good? Everyone is together for fun." Qin Feiyang was suspicious. If it's just a simple gathering, of course it's good. But why does Fat Lord feel that it's not that simple? Fatso frowned. "What's not simple?" Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at Fatso, looked at the men, women and children in the garden, and said with a smile, "I haven't seen such a happy atmosphere for a long time." Chapter 28:18. Not long after, the emperor returned from the morning court. Seeing so many people coming down, the emperor was also stunned. "Uncle, I won't disturb you, right?" Zhao Shuanger laughed. No. I'm so happy that you guys can come. You guys chat first, I'll go change my clothes." The emperor smiled slightly, walked into the attic, looked at Lu Qiuyu, and asked in a low voice, "What's going on?" "It was Feiyang who invited us, saying that he wanted everyone to get together and have a good time." Lu Qiuyu was helpless. The emperor turned his head to look at Qin Feiyang, who was standing with Fatso, and couldn't help but shake his head and smile, saying, "All right, as long as he's happy." Qin Feiyang was indeed very happy now, because it had been too long since they had gathered like this. Those smiling faces were like the sun, warming his heart. This scene was also slowly imprinted in his heart, and he would never forget it for the rest of his life. Night gradually fell. The entire autumn rain building was brightly lit. In the garden, there were 5 round tables, which were already filled with hot dishes. "Feiyang, let your brothers and sisters come out to gather," Emperor Hong said. Qin Feiyang patted his head and laughed. "I almost forgot about them, but before you see them, you guys have to be mentally prepared." "What?" Everyone looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang smiled mysteriously, and with a wave of his arm, 10 figures appeared in front of everyone. It was Qin Haoyan, Qin Wan, Qin Xian, Qin Yin, Qin Ji, Qin Yi, Situ Feiyang, Lu Xiaofei and his sister. And Qin Haoyan and the others were caught off guard. Because they were not prepared in advance, they were suddenly taken out by Qin Feiyang. At the same time, Emperor Hong and the others also looked at Qin Haoyan and the others suspiciously. Gradually, they revealed a trace of bewilderment. Lu Qiuyu looked at Qin Yi and asked, "You are?" Qin Yi stepped forward and hugged Lu Qiuyu's arm, and said with dissatisfaction, "Mother, you can't even recognize your own daughter? It's really you." Lu Qiuyu's face was full of shock. What was going on? A few days ago, they were still 2 children. How did they become a young lady and a handsome young man, after going to the Black Tortoise world? Qin Yi also ran in front of Lu Qiuyu and smiled. "Mother, look at our cultivation." Boom. Qin Yi directly released his aura. "This is divine might." Lu Qiuyu was stunned. Qin Yi smiled proudly and said, "Brother Zhu Yi and I have both broken through to the War God realm." "What? Both of you broke through to the War God level?" Lu Qiuyu was dumbfounded. Qin Yin smiled and said, "I don't know about them. We have already become war gods, and Brother Haoyan has already become a monarch god." "No way." Lu Qiuyu looked at the children in front of her in shock. The emperor and the others were also in disbelief. How many days had it been? Including today, it had only been 5 days, and he had already broken through to the Divine Lord realm? Imperial Mother, Imperial Father, that is indeed the case. Qin Haoyan nodded, and also released his aura. How could this be? Everyone's face was filled with bewilderment. You may not know, but Feiyang's Black Tortoise realm now has a time array that lasts 1 day and 1,000 years. Although they have only been in the Black Tortoise realm for 5 days, 5,000 years have passed in there. In addition to all kinds of pills and resources, 5,000 years to break through to the Monarch God realm is actually considered slow. Qin Yuan smiled and said. He had been to the Black Tortoise realm and knew how terrifying its foundation was. 1 day and 1,000 years. The emperor and Lu Qiuyu looked at each other. Lu Zheng came back to his senses and hurriedly looked at the Lu siblings and said, Xiaofei, Xiaojia, come. Let me see how far you have cultivated. You brat, come over here and let me take a good look. Fatso waved at Situ Feiyang. In the past few days, the 3 of them had become more mature and steady, exuding a sharp aura from their bodies. Father, Xiaofei, Xiaojia, and I have only cultivated in the Black Tortoise realm for a long time. How much can we improve in 3 days? Situ Feiyang was helpless. Yes. We have only just become gods. As for Xiaojia, she has barely reached the War God realm. Lu Xiaofei said. You have also become gods. Everyone looked at the 2 of them in shock. What is there to be surprised about? If Anti-Fire Lotus was not worried that we would break through too quickly and affect our state of mind and deliberately slowed down our speed, I am afraid that even Xiaojia would have become gods. Situ Feiyang said. This is the result of deliberately slowing down the speed? Everyone was dumbfounded. If they did not slow down the speed, what cultivation would these little ones have now? It was hard to imagine. Wait a minute. Fire Lotus. Lu Qiuyu looked at Qin Feiyang and asked suspiciously, Who is Fire Lotus? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, She is a sister that I recognized. Lu Qiuyu said, Then why don't you let her come out? We can meet her too. Qin Feiyang was a little hesitant. This is your fault, child. You brought a friend back and still hit her? The emperor was also displeased. There will be a chance in the future. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Emperor Hong greeted with a smile. All right, the food is almost ready. Everyone, please take a seat. Everyone drank and chatted merrily all the way until late at night. Other than those who knew about it, everyone else went to rest. Although the Autumn Rain Pavilion could not accommodate so many people, there were still many palaces nearby. Inside the pavilion, Qin Feiyang, Emperor Hong, Emperor Chen, Qin Yuan, Li Jian and Old Man Qin were sitting together. Then I will also go back. Qin Haoyan walked out of the pavilion and looked at Qin Feiyang. Don't go yet. Qin Feiyang said. Qin Haoyan looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang looked at the pavilion where the candlelight was gradually extinguished and said, Come in and have a seat. Qin Haoyan walked into the pavilion and sat opposite Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang asked, Do you know why I let you go to the Black Tortoise world to cultivate? Beside him, Emperor Hong and the others were all drinking tea, not saying a word. I don't know. Qin Haoyan shook his head. I want to pass the responsibility of protecting the Great Qin and Forgotten Continent to you. Qin Feiyang said. Qin Haoyan was stunned and shook his head. I don't have the time. Then you can't run away, because you are the 3rd person to have the purple gold dragon blood. Although father and mother gave birth to so many brothers and sisters, I believe that none of them can achieve ancestral awakening. Qin Feiyang smiled. You are so sure? Qin Haoyan frowned. It seems that when you awaken the purple gold dragon soul, I already knew the opportunity for ancestral awakening. This opportunity is the purple gold dragon soul. In other words, only the descendants of the Qin clan who awaken the purple gold dragon soul have a certain chance of ancestral awakening. Qin Feiyang said. Qin Haoyan frowned and said, Even so what? I don't know why our Qin clan has the purple gold dragon blood. But I know one thing. Everyone who has the purple gold dragon blood has a different fate than others. For example, my ancestors and I have fought hard to protect the Great Qin. I believe that you will be no exception. Qin Feiyang said. I don't believe in fate. Qin Haoyan shook his head. Whether you believe it or not, in the future, you have to bear the responsibility of protecting all of this. As for my ancestors and I, To be honest, when I returned to the ancient world this time, I didn't plan to come back alive. I think the ancestors should have already made preparations for this. Qin Feiyang sighed. Qin Haoyan frowned and said, "What are you facing in the ancient world? There are some things that are useless even if I tell you. You just have to remember to protect our homeland." With that, Qin Feiyang took out 10 legendary grade divine artifacts and 10 supreme grade divine arts, and said, "These are for you alone." "So much?" Qin Haoyan was stunned. "The more you get, the greater the responsibility. I sincerely hope that if there is a day when I come back alive, nothing will change here." Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Haoyan and said. Qin Haoyan frowned. Why did he feel that something was wrong? "I'll be leaving tomorrow morning." Qin Feiyang sighed. "What?" Qin Haoyan was stunned. Although he was also in the Black Tortoise world, because he wasn't in the castle, he couldn't hear what was going on outside, so he didn't know about the small beast. "What? You still don't want me to leave?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Qin Haoyan snorted coldly and said, "I can't wait for you to scram. Don't you know? You're a person who's cold on the outside but warm on the inside." Qin Feiyang shook his head, and then personally handed over the divine artifacts and divine arts to Qin Haoyan, and said, "Brother, I'll leave everything at home to you." "Brother," Qin Haoyan murmured. Qin Feiyang calling him little brother caused his heart to churn. From the moment Qin Feiyang killed his mother, he never thought that there would be a day when they would call each other brothers. "You guys are brothers." Emperor Hong laughed. "Haoyan, this is because your big brother trusts you and trusts you, so he gave you such a heavy burden. You can't let him down." Emperor Chen sighed. Qin Haoyan looked at Emperor Hong and Emperor Chen, then looked at Qin Yuan and the others, and finally looked at Qin Feiyang. In the end, he took a deep breath, took the divine artifacts and divine arts, and said, "I'll take care of everything at home. Don't die outside. I still want to take revenge on you." Qin Feiyang smiled with relief and said, "Just for your words, I will work hard to survive. Then I'll be leaving. I won't be seeing you off tomorrow morning." Qin Haoyan stood up and said, "Go." Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Qin Haoyan turned around and walked out of the pavilion. Just as he turned around, 2 drops of tears quietly slipped down. After Qin Haoyan left, Qin Feiyang retracted his gaze, looked at Emperor Hong and the others and smiled. "I knew it, I wouldn't be wrong about people." The faces of Emperor Hong and the others were also filled with gratification. Next, everyone sat in the pavilion, drinking tea and chatting, enjoying the last night. Gradually, the sky brightened. Qin Feiyang looked at the horizon, put down the teacup in his hand, and quietly released his spiritual will. Soon, he saw a scene that made his heart ache. No one was actually sleeping. They stood silently in front of the window, looking at him. Obviously, although he had deliberately concealed it, everyone had already noticed it. Moreover, in order to consider his feelings, no one said anything. They all chose to stand in the dark of the night and silently accompany him for the entire night. "Thank you," Qin Feiyang muttered, 2 drops of tears falling from the corner of his eyes. He then got up and stepped into the air without saying a word, disappearing step by step. All that was left was a back view that was imprinted in everyone's hearts, one that they would never forget. Chapter 28:19. Feiyang. Lu Qiuyu stood in front of the window and looked at Qin Feiyang's back as he left. She could no longer hold back her tears. The emperor silently held her in his arms. His heart was also extremely bitter. "Boss, do you think we're all stupid? Don't you know you're leaving? We've been with you for so many years." Fatso also hugged the reluctant Li Yan and muttered, "Bastard! You must come back alive." Ling Yunfei whispered, "Feiyang will all wait for you at home." Old Man Ren Wushuang, Luo Qingzhu, Feng Ling Yin Nanshan, Jiang Jingyi, and others were also silently sending Qin Feiyang off. Spirit State. The Sea of Despair. The surface of the sea in the morning was covered with a layer of white frost. A figure descended above the sea. It was Qin Feiyang. Without any concealment, his divine sense flooded into the undersea city. Whoosh! After a while, 4 figures swept out of the sea. They were the Mermaid Princess, the Mermaid Emperor, the Black-Winged King, and the White-Winged King. Why didn't you go down directly? You even released your divine sense. Do you want me to carry you down in a palanquin? The Mermaid Emperor looked at Qin Feiyang with dissatisfaction. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and said, "We won't go down because we're leaving." Leaving? The 4 of them were stunned. The Mermaid Princess hurriedly said, "Feiyang, it's only been a few days." Qin Feiyang said, "Something happened, so we have to leave." The Mermaid Princess looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously, then looked at the Mermaid Emperor and said, "Father, take care of yourself at home. This is too sudden." The Mermaid Emperor frowned. "Yeah. Didn't you say you could stay for hundreds of years? What happened? Why did you leave so suddenly?" The Black-Winged Monarch and the White-Eyed Wolf also looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. "It's nothing." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Who are you trying to fool? Leaving in such a hurry, something big must have happened." The Mermaid Emperor said, "Father, Feiyang has good intentions. He didn't tell you because he didn't want you to worry." The Mermaid Princess said. The Mermaid Emperor looked at the Mermaid Princess and sighed deeply. All right. But kid, you better listen carefully. You must take care of my daughter. If I find out that you bullied her, I will not let you off." Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and said, "I can bully anyone but not her. At least you have a conscience. Then you can leave." The Mermaid Emperor waved his hand and turned his head away, his face full of reluctance. "Uncles, please take care of my father in the future," the Mermaid Princess said as she looked at the Black-Winged Monarch duo. "Don't worry and go." The 2 of them smiled. Phew. The Mermaid Princess took a deep breath and looked at the Mermaid Emperor one last time. She looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Let's go." Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled at the Black-Winged Monarch duo. Then, he pulled the Mermaid Princess and left without looking back. The Black-Winged Monarch patted the Mermaid Emperor's shoulder and said, "Old man, if you don't take a few more looks, they will really be gone." "If they are gone, so be it." The Mermaid Emperor snorted, but his eyes did not listen to him. He looked at Qin Feiyang and the Mermaid Princess. Seeing that the 2 of them were really going to disappear, the Mermaid Emperor quickly shouted, "Daughter, you must protect yourself." "I will, father." The Mermaid Princess stopped and turned to smile at the Mermaid Emperor. Then she quickly disappeared into the sky with Qin Feiyang. The Mermaid Emperor sighed deeply. "Don't sigh. A married daughter is like water that has been poured out." The Black-Winged Monarch duo comforted him. The Mermaid Emperor said angrily, "But she is not married yet. Is this any different from being married? Let's talk about it later. Young people have their own pursuits and stages. Old people like us should just stay at home and enjoy the rest of our lives." The Black-Winged Monarch laughed. "When you were fighting with me for fame and fortune in the past, why didn't you have such awareness?" The Mermaid Emperor rolled his eyes. "Didn't you say it yourself? That was a fight for fame and fortune. Since it was a fight for fame and fortune, it was impossible for us to have such awareness. All right. Let's go and have a few drinks with you." The duo dragged the Mermaid Emperor and flew down. So that's what happened. In the sky above a mountain. After listening to Qin Feiyang's explanation, the Mermaid Princess nodded in realization. If not for the small beast, I would not have left so quickly. Qin Feiyang shook his head. The Mermaid Princess asked, "Then this promise of 10,000 years, are you serious about it?" "There's no escaping from it," Qin Feiyang said. "That's true." The Mermaid Princess nodded. "Not to mention anything else, just the Changshui. In order to take back Changshui, the battle between Qin Feiyang and the small beast would erupt sooner or later." Soon, the duo arrived at the Butterfly Valley. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and Wang Xiaojie appeared. The current Wang Xiaojie had also stepped into the War God realm. "Master's wife." Wang Xiaojie looked at the Mermaid Princess with a hint of surprise on his face. "Long time no see." The Mermaid Princess smiled slightly. Wang Xiaojie scratched his head and looked at Qin Feiyang saying, "Master, you are too unreasonable. Master's wife is back, but you hid it from everyone." "You talk too much?" Qin Feiyang glared at him. Wang Xiaojie chuckled and asked, "Why did you suddenly pull me out? It's about time we have to leave. You should go back and take care of your sister." Qin Feiyang smiled. "Leave?" Wang Xiaojie was stunned. "Weren't you there at the time? If I don't leave today, I'm afraid I'll be buried here forever," Qin Feiyang said. "That's right. That small beast gave you 3 days. Wang Xiaojie nodded. 3,000 years had passed in the Black Tortoise world, and he had almost forgotten about it. Work hard. If you have time, go help Gongsun Bei and contribute to the Forgotten Continent. After all, we can't let your cultivation down, right?" Qin Feiyang smiled. "This," Wang Xiaojie hesitated. Qin Feiyang asked, "You want to go to the ancient world with me?" Wang Xiaojie laughed dryly. "Don't even think about it. I'm already very happy that you can help me protect Great Qin and the Forgotten Continent," Qin Feiyang said. Wang Xiaojie mumbled, "But I really want to go and see it." Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. "There will be a chance in the future." "All right then." Wang Xiaojie nodded helplessly and smiled. "Then Master, Mistress, take care." The two nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and opened the spatial gate. "Aren't we going to look for Dong Jingyang?" Mermaid Princess asked. "No. Since he didn't come yesterday, he must be prepared to stay in the Forgotten Continent." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and pulled Mermaid Princess into the spatial gate. "Master, wait, where's Qin? Wang Xiaojie suddenly called out to Qin Feiyang and asked. "He has already returned to the Forgotten Continent." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and disappeared with Mermaid Princess. "He has already returned?" Wang Xiaojie was stunned. Demon Dragon Island. The statue was still standing by the sea, like a ruler overlooking the entire Great Qin. Beside the statue stood a man and a woman. This man and woman were Dong Jingyang and Bai Long. Clang. In the sky, accompanied by a loud sound, a stone door slowly opened. Dong Jingyang looked up and smiled. "It's the spatial gate, he's here." Bai Long glanced at Dong Jingyang and looked up at the spatial gate, his face full of reluctance. Qin Feiyang and Mermaid Princess walked out hand in hand. When they saw Dong Jingyang and Bai Long below, they were stunned. After putting away the spatial gate, Qin Feiyang brought Mermaid Princess and landed in front of Dong Jingyang and smiled. "There's no need to specially send me off." "Send you off?" Dong Jingyang was stunned. "Is it not?" Seeing Dong Jingyang's reaction, Qin Feiyang asked. "Of course not. I've specially waited here for you to return to the ancient world together," Dong Jingyang said. Qin Feiyang was stunned and smiled bitterly. "Seeing that you didn't go to the Imperial Palace yesterday, I thought you were going to stay." "Yesterday, we originally planned to go to the Imperial Palace, but thinking that it was a little inappropriate for us to go. We were all outsiders, so we didn't go," Dong Jingyang said. "I see." Qin Feiyang suddenly smiled, looked at Bai Long, and asked with a smile, "You're willing to let him go to his death?" Bai Long looked at Dong Jingyang and smiled. "Although I'm reluctant as a man, I should be responsible." Qin Feiyang smiled. For the first time, he realized that Bai Long's personality was actually quite good. It was just that he was cursed in the past, and his personality became a little extreme. Qin Feiyang looked at Dong Jingyang and asked, "Are you ready?" Dong Jingyang smiled faintly, looked at Bai Long, and said, "Then I'll be leaving. Protect yourself and help to protect Great Qin." "Okay." Bai Long nodded and said with a little sob, "You must come back alive. Life and death are fated. Riches and honor are up to the heavens. If I can really come back alive, I'll openly marry you as Dong Jingyang and hold a grand wedding ceremony for you," Dong Jingyang said. "I'll be waiting." Bai Long nodded, a weeping beauty. Dong Jingyang raised his arm, gently wiped away the tears on Bai Long's face, and resolutely turned around and rushed into the sea. "We'll meet again." Qin Feiyang smiled at Bai Long, then reluctantly glanced at the land, pulled the Mermaid Princess, and disappeared into the deep sea without looking back. It was also possible that they would never meet again. The teleportation altar to the miracle was in the deep sea. Although the conditions to revive the altar were harsh, it was not difficult for Qin Feiyang back then, let alone now. Soon, They returned to the second level of the miracle. Why are they so fast? Sensing the appearance of the three, the fire python immediately descended in front of them, and was quite surprised. Small beast has given the order. Do we dare to continue to stay? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. What? Lord Beast God has been to Great Qin. The fire python was shocked. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, let's not talk about this. You secretly sent us back to Great Qin. Did Small Beast do anything to you? No. The fire python shook its head and said with a smile, because of this, I gained a blessing in disguise. A blessing in disguise? Qin Feiyang and the others looked at it suspiciously. Now I'm not only the guardian of the first and second level, but also the guardian of the third level. The fire python laughed. No way. Qin Feiyang and the others looked at each other. Chapter 28:20. Wasn't the guardian of the third floor equivalent to the guardian of the underworld king's hell? Needless to say, the fire python had really profited from a disaster, because the first and second floors were on a completely different level from the third floor. Dong Zhengyang asked. Then can you enter the temple to cultivate? Of course. The fire python nodded. Since he had already become the guardian of the third floor, it was natural for him to enter the temple to cultivate. After all, the temple had a time array. Who didn't want to enter? Congratulations. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and smiled. You're welcome. The fire python shook his head. Since Brother Fire is now the guardian of the underworld king's hell, then I implore Brother Fire to take care of the blood demon race in the future. Because back then in the underworld king's hell, the blood demon race helped me a lot. Qin Feiyang said. Of course. The fire python smiled. Thank you. Qin Feiyang was grateful. Why are you thanking me as a friend? What are your plans next? The fire python asked. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said in a deep voice. I don't want to go to the underworld king's hell anymore. I want to go back to the ancient world directly. The chief pavilion master, Long Zun, and the other ancestral dragons all thought that he was in the underworld king's hell. If he were to return to the ancient world now, he would definitely be able to catch them off guard. The most important thing was, if he entered the underworld king's hell, he wouldn't be able to enter the castle to cultivate. The castle's time array was 1,000 years per day. It was a bit of a waste not being able to enter to cultivate. Return to the ancient world? The fire python frowned. I know that you can't help me anymore. As a friend, I won't make things difficult for you. I want to try it myself. Qin Feiyang said. You're going by yourself? The entrance to the ancient world is on the first floor. And you know the rules of the first floor. Once you surpass the War Emperor and enter the first floor, you will be erased by the rule force. Not to mention, you're still at the 9th heaven realm. If you go to the first floor now, you're courting death. Do you know that? The fire python quickly said. Rule force. Qin Feiyang looked up at the sky, his eyes to say, why don't we stay on the second floor? Dong Zhengyang said. Staying on the second level meant entering the castle to cultivate in seclusion. That won't do. If I let you stay on the second floor and Lord Beast God finds out, he will definitely punish me. Simply speaking, you only have one choice now. Enter the hell of the King of Hell. The fire python said. Feiyang, you can enter hell too. At that time, you can go to the ancient city of the Serene King and cultivate in seclusion for a few hundred years. The ancient city's time array is also very powerful. By the time we leave hell, you'll be able to break through to the imperishable realm. The mermaid princess said. Qin Feiyang remained silent. Dong Zhengyang glanced at Qin Feiyang, then looked at the fire python and cupped his hands. Brother Fire, may I ask where the entrance to the 4th floor is? The 4th floor? The fire python was slightly stunned. He frowned and asked. Why are you suddenly asking about this? I'm just curious. Dong Zhengyang said. In the past few days, I've learned a bit about the Infernal King's Hell. The entrance to the 4th floor is in the east, which is the opposite direction of the Divine Demon Forest. However, to enter the 4th floor, you must first be at the imperishable realm. Otherwise, Other than Lord Beast God, even I can't send you to the 4th floor safely. Because the passage to the 4th floor is filled with a terrifying storm. This storm can kill any living being below the imperishable realm. The fire python said. So terrifying? Dong Zhengyang was shocked. Yes. In short, it's best not to go before reaching the imperishable realm. After the fire python finished speaking, it looked at Qin Feiyang again. It steeled its heart and closed its eyes. Dong Zhengyang and the mermaid princess looked at the fire python suspiciously. After a while, the fire python opened his eyes and said, Lord Beast God and Lord Ice Dragon are not in the divine ruins now. I'll send you to the ancient world. What? Qin Feiyang looked up at the fire python. I also found the entrance to the ancient world just now. There's no time to lose. Let's go now. After saying that, the fire python took the 3 of them and appeared in the sky above a plain on the 1st floor. There were fierce beasts everywhere on the plain. But at this moment, an extremely strange scene appeared. There was nothing in the void in front of them. But these fierce beasts were retreating in fear. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be scared out of their wits and think that they had seen a ghost. Qin Feiyang and the others were very familiar with it. The fire python waved his hand, and a surge of divine power rushed forward. With a clang, an ancient stone door appeared out of thin air. This was the entrance to the ancient world. Brother Fire, thank you. If the small beast finds out, just say that you don't know anything and let it come to me. I have a way to deal with it. Qin Feiyang said. Okay. The fire python nodded and said, take care. I look forward to seeing you next time. I look forward to it too. By the way, tell the madman and Yang Li that I have returned to the ancient world. After Qin Feiyang said that, he led Dong Zhengyang and the mermaid princess into the stone door without looking back. The fire python also withdrew his divine power, and the stone door disappeared into thin air. You must live. I'm still waiting for you to kill the fire dragon. The fire python muttered, and then disappeared into thin air. Northern region. Land of the undead. As always, it was incomparably dark. The air was filled with a rotten and tragic smell. Qin Feiyang glanced at the familiar land and looked at Dong Zhengyang and the mermaid princess. He smiled and said, You two go to the Black Tortoise world first. Okay. The 2 of them nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent the 2 of them to the Black Tortoise world. Then he took Huai and the 5-clawed golden dragon out. This is? Huai glanced around. That's right. Land of the undead. Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. Huai grinned and said, Okay, we can go to Dongling. Speaking of Dongling, the 5-clawed golden dragon's eyes lit up. Thinking about immortal intoxication all day long. Qin Feiyang looked at the 2 of them speechlessly. The 5-clawed golden dragon also maintained his human form. He was a middle-aged man in golden clothes. What do you know? Huai pursed his lips. The 3 of them rushed out of the land of the undead and went straight to Nine Heavens Palace. Nine Heavens Palace. Peak of the mountain. An old man in white sat cross-legged in front of the heaven stairway. Although countless disciples came and went, the old man never opened his eyes. This person was Elder Wei. Shangguan Fenglan's master was also one of the guardians of Nine Heavens Palace. Swish. Suddenly, 3 figures descended on the peak of the mountain. It was Qin Feiyang and the other 2. However, Qin Feiyang and Huai had changed their appearances in order not to cause a sensation. And, sensing the aura of Qin Feiyang and the other 2, Elder Wei finally opened his eyes. 2 cold lights burst out of his eyes. The disciples who came and went also stopped and looked at the 3 unfamiliar faces. Elder Wei. Qin Feiyang stepped forward, bowed respectfully, and transmitted his voice. I am Qin Feiyang. Elder Wei's heart moved. He turned to look at the disciples next to him and waved his hand. What are you all looking at? The group of disciples suddenly dispersed. Elder Wei retracted his gaze and looked at Huai and the 5-clawed golden dragon, frowning. Which one of you is the vice palace master? Me. Huai said. Elder Wei immediately looked at Huai, his face full of anger, and secretly said, No matter what, you are still the vice palace master. How can you run around all day? Don't I have you guys here? Why should I stay in Nine Heavens Palace? Hui pouted. How can we be the same as you? Elder Wei was helpless. What's the difference? Enough. Little Gold, let's go to East Tomb. Qin Feiyang, hurry up and tell me what you need to tell me. Hui left a sentence and went straight to the teleportation altar above the stairway with the 5-clawed golden dragon. Because Qin Feiyang had already used the space-time gate in Great Qin, he could only go to East Tomb through the altar. Sigh. Elder Wei couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Qin Feiyang shook his head in amusement and transmitted his voice. Elder Wei, how has everyone been these years? Pretty good. Elder Wei nodded and asked, how about you guys? We're pretty good too, Qin Feiyang said. Last time, the Vice Palace Master came back and said you guys were going to hell? Elder Wei said. Qin Feiyang nodded. Is it over? Elder Wei asked. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, not yet. I ran back halfway. You can run back halfway? Elder Wei was stunned. It's a long story. This time I'm here mainly to give you guys something. Qin Feiyang secretly said. What is it? Elder Wei was suspicious. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and more than 10,000 jade slips and more than 10,000 divine artifacts appeared. And Elder Wei was surprised. This is what Senior Brother Frenzy and I got in hell. We agreed that each of us would get half. His half was prepared for the Nine Heavens Palace. Although those supreme divine artifacts are with him now, these divine artifacts I'm giving you are all legendary and pinnacle grade. Qin Feiyang said. So many? Elder Wei was dumbfounded. These divine artifacts were indeed legendary and pinnacle grade. And there were not only legendary and pinnacle grade divine arts, but also supreme grade. What exactly was the Underworld King's hell? There were so many terrifying divine artifacts. Wait. Where's Frenzy? Why don't I see him? Suddenly, Elder Wei glanced behind Qin Feiyang and hurriedly asked. He's still in hell, Qin Feiyang said. Elder Wei was surprised. Why is he still in hell? Could it be? Don't think too much, don't think too much. He's fine. On the contrary, he has a great fortune now. Because he's receiving the inheritance of the law. Qin Feiyang smiled. Elder Wei was shocked. There's still the inheritance of the law in hell. Qin Feiyang nodded. Unbelievable. Elder Wei murmured, looking at Qin Feiyang and said with a hoarse smile, thank you. With these divine artifacts and divine arts, the strength of my Jiutian Palace will instantly increase by several times. You're being too polite. Jiutian Palace has given me and Senior Brother Frenzy a new lease of life. Of course, we all hope that Jiutian Palace can become better and better. Qin Feiyang said. It's enough that you guys can have this kind of heart. Elder Wei was very pleased. Hurry up and keep it, lest other disciples see it. Also, it's best not to spread the news that I gave you guys the divine artifacts and divine arts. Qin Feiyang reminded. This old man knows. After all, there are so many divine artifacts and divine arts. As long as one isn't a fool, they will guess and be suspicious. Elder Wei nodded. With a wave of his old hand, all the divine arts and divine artifacts disappeared into the yin and yang ring. Chapter 28-21. In addition, Qin Feiyang pondered for a while, looked at Old Wei and said, I'll give you another 100 crystal veins and soul veins. Crystal veins, soul veins? Old Wei was slightly taken aback, shook his head and said, we have all of these, you don't have to give them to us. Are you sure you don't want them? These aren't ordinary crystal veins and soul lines. Qin Feiyang laughed. Although this old man has never been to the divine land, I can be considered as someone who has seen the world. Other than the divine level soul veins and crystal veins, they are nothing in my eyes. Old Wei chuckled. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Did Old Wei think that he was going to give him the soul veins and crystal veins below the divine level? If it's rank 1 or 2 divine level soul veins and crystal veins, this old man can still consider it. Old Wei said again. Old Senior, you're looking down on this junior. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. A mere rank 1 or 2 divine level soul veins and crystal veins, he couldn't take them out. Looking at Qin Feiyang's reaction, Old Wei couldn't help but be suspicious. Could it be that it was more than rank 1 or 2? Come with me, elder. Qin Feiyang didn't explain much, turned around and landed in a valley below, and transmitted his voice. Fire Lotus, are you ready? Is it necessary? Fire Lotus asked secretly. Of course. You and Hui have helped me so much all these years. What's a mere crystal vein and soul vein? Qin Feiyang laughed secretly. That's right. Giving the crystal vein and soul vein to Nine Heaven Palace was all because of Fire Lotus and Hui. Especially Fire Lotus, who had been helping him all these years. It could be said that, without Fire Lotus, there wouldn't be the current Black Tortoise realm, because the current Black Tortoise realm was created by Fire Lotus. So, putting himself in their shoes, he naturally wouldn't mistreat Fire Lotus and Nine Heaven Palace. Alright. Fire Lotus responded. Soon, Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and 100 crystal veins and soul veins appeared. This is? Elder Wei stood beside Qin Feiyang. At first he didn't think much of it, but when he saw these crystal veins and soul lines with his own eyes, he was shocked. Even though he was knowledgeable and experienced, he couldn't help but be shocked when he saw the 100 crystal veins and spirit veins. This was because he discovered that he couldn't see through the levels of these crystal veins and soul veins. These are all rank 8 deities. Qin Feiyang smiled. Level 8. God Realm. Old Wei muttered, his eyes filled with shock. You couldn't find a single crystal vein and soul vein of this level in the entire 4 regions. Perhaps it was rare even in the Divine Land. When he came back to his senses, Elder Wei hurriedly waved his hand and said, This is too precious. I don't deserve it. Why are you being so polite with me? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. This old man is not being polite with you. You're facing dragons now. What you need the most is cultivation resources. This kind of supreme treasure is the most helpful to you. Don't give it to us. It's a waste. Elder Wei shook his head. Taking out 100 rank 8 spirit veins and crystal veins in one go was simply too shocking. Spirit veins and crystal veins of this level were legendary existences in his eyes. I still have a lot. Qin Feiyang smiled. A lot? Elder Wei was stunned. Yes. Back in the Divine Land, I snatched a lot of crystal veins and soul veins. And now, the time rule of the Black Tortoise realm is 1,000 years, so they've all evolved to rank 8 deities. Qin Feiyang said. 1,000 years in a day. The corner of Elder Wei's mouth twitched. These were all monsters. After pondering for a while he said, Well, this old man won't stand on ceremony with you. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't tempted by the rank 8 deities' soul veins and crystal veins. It was only because he considered that Qin Feiyang and the others needed more crystal veins and soul veins, so he refused. But now, since Qin Feiyang said that he had a lot, he certainly didn't stand on ceremony. Qin Feiyang thought for a while and asked, How is Shengguanqiu now? She went to the Divine Land a long time ago. Elder Wei said. What? She went to the Divine Land. Qin Feiyang frowned. Yes. The last time the Pavilion Master went to the Divine Land, he took Shengguanqiu with him. The Pavilion Master came back and said that Shengguanqiu chose to stay in the Divine Land. Elder Wei said. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Why did they go to the Divine Land? Didn't they tell you before that the Chief Pavilion Master would go to the Divine Land every 100 years? Elder Wei asked. Qin Feiyang thought for a while and nodded. Yes, but it's been so long that I forgot. It was the Deputy Pavilion Master who told him this. Therefore, he went to the Deputy Pavilion Master to inquire about the dragons. The Deputy Pavilion Master told him that if he really wanted to go to the Divine Land, he could go together with the Pavilion Master. Qin Feiyang also asked how long it would take for the Pavilion Master to go to the Divine Land. The Deputy Pavilion Master answered that it would take 50 years. Qin Feiyang couldn't wait 50 years, so he didn't take it to heart. Shengguanqiu entered the Divine Land after he entered the Hell of the Nether King. And he stayed in the Hell of the Nether King for more than 200 years. In other words, Shengguanqiu had stayed in the Divine Land for almost 200 years. Why did she stay in the Divine Land? Qin Feiyang frowned. Elder Wei sighed. Do you still need to think about it? Any sensible person knows that she must have done it for you. Silly woman. Qin Feiyang shook his head and asked, did the pavilion master say where she is in the divine land now? You'll have to ask Shangguan Fenglan, or the pavilion master. Elder Wei said. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead and sighed. She can't stay in the treasure house of the divine land. What do you mean? She's a member of the treasure house. Isn't it good to stay in the treasure house? Elder Wei was suspicious. There are some things that you don't understand. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. That's it for now. I'll go find the pavilion master. Okay. Elder Wei nodded. Qin Feiyang opened an altar and walked up. Strange. Elder Wei shook his head, put away the vein of soul and vein of crystal, and returned to the ninth heaven palace. When he found the first elder, explained this matter, and took out the vein of soul, vein of crystal, divine weapons and divine arts, the first elder was also shocked. Then, the first elder was filled with emotion. He didn't expect that in just a few hundred years, Qin Feiyang and frenzy had grown to such a level, and given such a rich reward to the ninth heaven realm. In the southwest of the northern region, there was a stretch of undulating mountains. Somewhere in the mountain, there was a valley. In the valley, there was a courtyard, and beside the courtyard, there was a small pond. Inside, lotus leaves stood tall and lotus flowers bloomed. In addition, there was a vegetable garden around. Numerous green wild vegetables, exuding vitality, swayed in the wind. From the looks of it, it was as if an ordinary family lived here. Everything appeared ordinary and plain. However, when Qin Feiyang came here and looked at the courtyard in front of him, his face was full of respect. Huff. Taking a deep breath, Qin Feiyang recovered his true appearance and bowed. Junior Qin Feiyang requests to see the pavilion master. Dida. At that moment, a burst of hurried footsteps sounded, and a woman walked out of the house. The woman was about 35 or 36 years old, wearing a red dress. Her black hair was tied up high, with an exquisite jade hairpin in the middle, looking dignified and virtuous. Moreover, she was very kind, without any threatening aura. Although there were crow's feet at the corner of her eyes, whether it was her figure or skin, they were all like a young girl. It's really you? The pavilion master stood at the door and looked at Qin Feiyang in a daze. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. The pavilion master walked quickly to Qin Feiyang and asked, "Didn't you go to the Hell of Hades?" "I just came back," Qin Feiyang said. "That's not right. I heard that this Hell of Hades can only come out after 1,000 years. Are you really Qin Feiyang?" The pavilion master frowned. Qin Feiyang took out a heaven's eye stone, held it in his hand, and said with a wry smile, "It's real." Seeing that the heaven's eye stone did not respond for a long time, the pavilion master was finally relieved and asked suspiciously, "It's not time yet. How did you come out?" "By chance, I found a way out." Qin Feiyang smiled vaguely. The pavilion master rolled his eyes, obviously not believing it, but he did not continue to ask and said, "Come in and sit." Qin Feiyang walked into the yard and followed the pavilion master to the stone table next to him. The pavilion master smiled and said, "Why did you suddenly come to me?" Qin Feiyang sighed and said, "There's something I have to ask." "What is it?" The pavilion master was suspicious. "Shangguan Qiu," Qin Feiyang said. The pavilion master was stunned and asked, "You've seen her?" "I haven't returned to the divine land yet. How could I see her? I just went to see Elder Wei, and he told me that Shangguan Qiu stayed in the divine land, so I came to you to ask about the details." Qin Feiyang said. "I see." The pavilion master nodded and said with a smile, "After I took her to the divine land, I went to the divine land again. She's doing well in the divine land." "Then where is she?" Qin Feiyang asked. The pavilion master smiled and said, "The treasure school in the Holy Dragon City." She really went to the treasure school, and it's the treasure school in the Holy Dragon City. Qin Feiyang's face suddenly darkened. "What's wrong?" Looking at Qin Feiyang's reaction, the pavilion master was puzzled. "What's she doing in the treasure school?" Qin Feiyang asked instead of answering. "Of course, she's helping the steward of the treasure school in the Holy Dragon City to take care of the treasure school's affairs," Qin Feiyang said. The steward of the treasure school. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and his divine power emerged and condensed into a round fatso. That's him. Last time I visited Qiu, she said that the steward treats her very well. And she made a friend called Ren Xiaolan. Ren Xiaolan is also helping the steward to take care of the treasure school's affairs. The pavilion master said. Whether it's the steward or Ren Xiaolan, I know them all. This Ren Xiaolan is valued by the steward because of me. Qin Feiyang sighed. The pavilion master said suspiciously. They're all people you know. Isn't that good? Why do you look so sad? There are some things that you don't know. Qin Feiyang shook his head. What are you trying to say? The pavilion master frowned. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, do they know about my relationship with Shangguan Qiu? They know. That's why the chief pavilion master let Qiu, stay in the Holy Dragon City. The pavilion master nodded. What? You've seen the chief pavilion master? Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up. We didn't see him with our own eyes, but according to the steward of the treasure school in the Holy Dragon City, the chief pavilion master seemed to be very happy after knowing about your relationship with Qiu. The pavilion master smiled. Chapter 28-22. She was worried that she couldn't deal with me, and now you're giving her such a good bargaining chip. Of course she's happy. Qin Feiyang snorted. Deal with you? Bargaining chip? The cabinet master was surprised. That's right. You're giving her timely help by sending Shangguan Qiu to her. Qin Feiyang shook his head. What do you mean by that? The cabinet master was confused. Don't you understand? The chief cabinet master and I are enemies. You're just causing trouble for me. Qin Feiyang said angrily. If he didn't know the cabinet master well, he would have suspected that the cabinet master was deliberately targeting him. What? Your enemies? The cabinet master was surprised. That's right. Qin Feiyang nodded. After calming down, he asked. You've been to the Divine Land. You should have heard of the dragon-slaying palace, right? I've heard a little about it. The cabinet master said. The dragon-slaying palace has 4 sovereigns. 2 of them are my 2 ancestors. Of the remaining 2, one is Supreme Cloud and the other is Supreme Beast. Supreme Beast has already submitted to me. Now only Supreme Cloud is left. Supreme Cloud is the chief cabinet master of the treasure school. Qin Feiyang said. The chief cabinet master is one of the 4 sovereigns of the dragon-slaying palace? The cabinet master was shocked. Yes. Although she's a sovereign of the dragon-slaying palace, she's tried to get rid of me more than once because of her ambition. She even fought with me in the Nether King's Hell. But in the end, she died in the hands of senior brother Lunatic. Think about it. Now that you've sent Shangguan Qiu to her, how can she not be happy? Qin Feiyang said. How could this be? The cabinet master murmured. Shangguan Qiu was not only her disciple, but also her biological daughter. But now, she had pushed Shangguan Qiu into the fire pit. Wait, since the chief cabinet master is dead, does that mean Yuer's crisis no longer exists? The cabinet master asked. It's not as simple as you think. Supreme Cloud's divine souls hell before she went there. In other words, even if we kill her in the underworld king's hell, she will be reborn. Qin Feiyang sighed. What do we do now? The pavilion master panicked. What else can we do? Of course we're going to the divine prefecture and rescue her from the treasure pavilion. Qin Feiyang said. Then go quickly. The pavilion master urged. We can't go now. We have to wait until dawn. Qin Feiyang shook his head. This was because they had to wait until dawn to open the gate of time and space. I'm sorry. I really didn't know about this. If I had known, I wouldn't have brought her to the divine continent no matter how much Qiu begged me. I wouldn't have left her in the divine continent either. The pavilion master looked at Qin Feiyang with a face full of self-blame. Qin Feiyang sighed deeply and said, I don't blame you. After all, you are in the northern region and know nothing about the situation in the divine land. Just now it was also my fault. I couldn't help but get angry with you. It's all right. You're also worried about Qiu. The pavilion master waved his hand. Actually, it's my fault. Shang Guanqiu went to the divine continent because of me. If I had been more ruthless back then and made her hate me more, I don't think this would have happened. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Silly boy. You don't understand things like love. Sometimes the deeper the hatred, the deeper the love. The pavilion master sighed. Suddenly, Hua Yi and the five-clawed golden dragon appeared and asked suspiciously, "What are you doing here?" Qin Feiyang looked up at the two of them and asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" "We came back from Dongling and heard from Old Man Wei that you hurriedly came to find the pavilion master, so we came to see if something had happened." The two of them landed beside Qin Feiyang and asked. Qin Feiyang asked, "So you've already gotten the immortal wine?" "Of course." Hui nodded and smiled proudly. "And this time, we've completely emptied the wine cellar of the Heaven Immortal Tower." Qin Feiyang shook his head speechlessly. Hui frowned. "Let's get down to business. Did something happen?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded and briefly explained the situation. Hui frowned and looked at the pavilion master. "Why are you so silly?" "Sigh." The pavilion master lowered his head and blamed himself. Hui sat at the side and shook his head. "It's my fault. When I went to Dongling with little gold to buy the immortal wine, I should have informed you." After Hui finished speaking, he became angry again. But who would have thought that this silly girl would run to the divine continent? Enough. Qin Feiyang stared at Hui and said, "For now, Shang Guanqiu shouldn't be in any danger." Hui and the other two looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. In the eyes of the pavilion master, we're still in hell. So there's no point in attacking Shang Guanqiu now. Qin Feiyang said. Yes. Even if she wants to use Shang Guanqiu to threaten you, she'll have to wait until hell is closed. As for now, I think she'll just send someone to monitor Shang Guanqiu's whereabouts. Hui nodded. So this time we'll go back to the ancient world and play a key role. Because the pavilion master won't think that we've already returned to the ancient world, so there won't be any precautions. After midnight, we'll go to the divine continent. If nothing goes wrong, we'll be able to easily take Shang Guanqiu away. Qin Feiyang said. Haha. It seems that going back to the ancient world is a wise choice. Hui laughed. If they entered hell again and left a few hundred years later, the pavilion master would catch Shang Guanqiu and kill them all when they were unprepared. Actually, there's another crucial point. It's only been a little more than 100 years since the pavilion master was killed. I think the pavilion master's divine soul and divine body haven't been rebuilt yet. The five-clawed golden dragon suddenly said. Yes, the pavilion master's cultivation is at the great achievement eternal realm. It'll take at least tens of thousands of years to rebuild her divine body and divine soul. Hui nodded. What's right? Didn't great-grandmother and the others say that the dragon-slaying palace also has a time formation? Although this time formation isn't very good, it can last 50 years in a day, 50 years in a day, 500 years in 10 days, and 5,000 years in 100 days. More than 100 years have passed. She should have rebuilt her divine soul and divine body long ago. Qin Feiyang said. You didn't think of this, did you? Hui smiled proudly. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang looked at him suspiciously. Think about it. She didn't trust Qin Batian and Lu Xingyang. Why would she put her split divine soul in the dragon-slaying palace? Then don't mention entering the dragon-slaying palace to rebuild her divine soul and divine body. You should know that your two ancestors aren't good people. If they knew this, would they let go of this opportunity? Definitely not. So, the chief pavilion master doesn't dare to enter the dragon-slaying palace to rebuild her divine body and divine soul. Hui smiled. That makes sense. Qin Feiyang nodded. So I'm sure that she hasn't rebuilt her complete divine soul and divine body. And this is an opportunity for us. We can directly control her divine soul. If she doesn't surrender, we'll destroy her. Hui sneered. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, It's useless to say this now. What if she has other ways? Let's wait until we reach the divine land. Hui smiled and said, Okay, I'll go back and see Lan Er. Qin Feiyang said, Don't tell her about Shang Guanqiu's current situation. Do I need you to remind me? Hui glanced at Qin Feiyang indifferently, opened an altar, and left without looking back. Qin Feiyang thought for a while, and waved his hand. Qin Chen appeared in front of him. Qin Feiyang pointed at the woman and said, "This is the pavilion master of the treasure pavilion. You should call her senior." "Greetings, senior." Qin Chen bowed respectfully. "He is." The pavilion master glanced at Qin Chen, and then looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. "He's one of my." Qin Feiyang glanced at Qin Chen with a hint of hesitation in his eyes. Finally, he looked at the pavilion master and smiled. "He's my disciple." "Disciple?" Qin Chen was stunned. The pavilion master was also surprised. She looked up at Qin Chen and smiled. "You're lucky to be able to become Qin Feiyang's disciple." Qin Chen wanted to say something but stopped. The five-clawed golden dragon shook his head helplessly and said, "Silly boy, why aren't you greeting your master?" Okay. Qin Chen came back to his senses and quickly knelt on the ground, saying respectfully, "Disciple greets master." "Get up, little gold. Since you're free now, take him to the north region and let him see the scenery of the ancient world," Qin Feiyang said. "Okay." The five-clawed golden dragon nodded and picked up Qin Chen as if he was picking up a chick, disappearing into the distance. The pavilion master looked at the back of the five-clawed golden dragon and asked suspiciously, "Feiyang, who is this little gold? Why do I feel that his aura is very strong?" "His real body is a five-clawed golden dragon, and his cultivation is also in the eternal realm. I subdued him in the divine land." Qin Feiyang smiled. Five-clawed golden dragon. The pavilion master was shocked. The five-clawed golden dragon was a divine dragon with an extremely orthodox bloodline power. Even among the dragons, it was rare. Qin Feiyang had subdued a five-clawed golden dragon? Did the dragons know about this? Would they come to find trouble with him? "Don't worry. The dragons wouldn't dare to find trouble with me even if they knew." Qin Feiyang smiled confidently. The pavilion master was slightly stunned and said with a wry smile, "That's true. After all, even in the divine land, you are very famous now." Thinking back to when Qin Feiyang first appeared in the northern region, he didn't have any cultivation at all. If it weren't for his clever mind, he would have died long ago. But now he had stepped into the greater ninth heaven realm. This speed was really too fast for others to catch up with. Qin Feiyang suddenly transmitted a voice to Dan Wangkai in the castle. "Refine a Triyuan true spirit elixir for me. I have it ready-made." Dan Wangkai was looking for herbs in the herb field. When he heard Qin Feiyang's voice, he immediately responded, "Then give it to me. I can raise my cultivation to the peak of the ninth heaven realm." Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. "Okay." Dan Wangkai responded, took out a jade box, and took out an elixir. Outside, Qin Feiyang's mind moved, and the elixir appeared in his hand out of thin air. This was the Triyuan True Spirit Elixir. Gold, purple, and silver, like three ribbons, intertwined together, looking extremely beautiful. There were also three dragon-shaped elixir chi lingering on it. "What kind of elixir is this?" The pavilion master looked at the Triyuan True Spirit Elixir curiously. "An elixir that can help me break through my cultivation." Qin Feiyang chuckled and put the Triyuan True Spirit Elixir into his mouth. Boom. Soon. A surge of majestic energy exploded within his body. Qin Feiyang's aura also burst out uncontrollably. In less than 3 breaths, his cultivation suddenly soared to the peak of the ninth heaven realm. However, right at the moment when he thought that it was the end, his cultivation began to soar once again. What's going on? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Young master, I forgot to tell you. This Triyuan True Spirit Elixir is the same as the Chaos Divine Elixir and the Yin-Yang Chaos Elixir. The Triyuan True Spirit Elixir with 3 dragon-shaped elixir chi has a 30% chance of increasing one's cultivation by 2 small realms. Dan Wangcai's voice suddenly sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Why didn't you say so earlier? Qin Feiyang said angrily. If he had said so earlier, he would have refined one himself. This way there would be a 40% chance. Because at that time he didn't look at the elixir recipe very carefully, so he didn't know there was such a thing. I thought you knew. Dan Wangkai chuckled. You guy. Qin Feiyang felt helpless. Feeling the soaring aura, he was extremely nervous. If he could suddenly reach the peak of the ninth heaven realm, it would undoubtedly save a lot of time. And now, what he needed the most was cultivation. Because the peak of the ninth heaven realm was a threshold. Once he stepped into the peak of the ninth heaven realm, he was only one step away from the half-step invincible realm. Boom. Time passed breath by breath. Under Qin Feiyang's nervous expectation, his cultivation suddenly soared to the peak of the ninth heaven realm. Great. Qin Feiyang also excitedly slapped the stone table and suddenly stood up. His face was full of excitement. This time, even the white-eyed wolf would be speechless. After all, there was only a 30% chance. No way. At the same time, the pavilion master sitting opposite him was also dumbfounded. He actually broke through 2 small realms in a row. What kind of elixir was this? It was unbelievable. One had to know. This was the ninth heaven realm, not the god of war, or the divine lord. It was incredible. If this elixir was auctioned, wouldn't it cause a frenzy among the people of the 4 major regions? No, it would be a bloodbath. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.